Chapter 634. The Man Who Cried Wolf. Left arrow. Dawnbreaker. The Dawnbreaker. I've read tales about this sword. The Sword of Light, the banisher of evil, the divine artifact, the bane of all undead. Yep. Despite the fact that it is Daedric, it is considered a holy artifact that can destroy the undead and other Daedra. It was carried by the Fighters Guild 1,000 years ago and used against the forces of evil. Look at that. Despite the fact that it is made of ebony, the metal is so perfect and pretty. But do you know why this ebony metal is white? I can only wonder. Ebony is the blood of the gods. The ebony on Nirn is black, because it is Shor's blood that splattered when he died. This ebony originated from Meridia's blood rather than Shor, hence the color. How informative! While John was doing the cleanup of the temple, Bryling kept fangirling over the sword he told her to hold for him. Despite her dignity as one of the Thane of Hafengar, she was a great nerd when it came to historical weapons. John made sure that the 20 guards that followed them survived unscathed and are all looking at Bryling in awe and admiration. They needed to witness this in order to feel that Bryling is a heroic person, not some sword pervert who can't pass a second without admiring the damn sword. Anyway, John had to use greed in order to collect all the shadow energy residing in the temple in order to hasten the process of it being fit for use by Meridia's cult again. John and Bryling refused to venerate Meridia, but swore to let her followers gather around her shrine peacefully. Moreover, John was intending to use Meridia's cult against the vampires of Fokihar, thus he hit 2 birds with 1 stone. As greed finished the cleansing of all shadow energy and devoured the remaining corrupted shades, John led the group outside and traveled in the mountains again until they reached the place that was his goal from the start, Wolfskull Cave. Of all places, Bryling sighed on the approach of that particular cave and got closer to John. So, the other undead problem, I believe that a proper Thane wouldn't let 2 undead nests fester in their hold. John replied, usually, necromancers keep hiding until they attain sufficient power and strike first. We don't usually catch a necromancer that easily. Bryling justified her ignorance. My sources can pinpoint the activities of magic groups in and keep tabs on them. The worm cult has been infiltrating Skyrim actively, and I have a serious animosity with them, so that is that. John said. Impressive, Bryling said, and by sources, you mean the black pigeons. I have no idea why people keep calling them that. John replied, raising his arms, but that was not my source. My source this time is that man over there. John waved towards one of the trees where a man wearing heavy winter clothes hid behind. The man was an imperial and a familiar face that Bryling saw before at the Blue Palace. 4 days ago, that man came to see Jarl Elisif the Fair on the day of the wedding of Vittoria Vici, just a few hours before her death. He spoke to her about a problem on the northern part of the hold and about people disappearing. John Dare personally talked to that man at that time and told him that he will offer as much help as he can. Varnius Junius, my imperial friend from Dragonbridge. John walked to the man and brought him closer. Hello. The man nodded his head as he stood in front of John, Bryling, and the guards. Thane Bryling, at your service. Bryling replied with an attitude worthy of her being a Thane of Hafengar. A Jarl soon, hopefully, John said. While causing her to be flustered, John winked at the people around in order for them to show support for her. My lady, my lord, I am truly grateful for your assistance. The imperial Varnius man bowed to John and Bryling. Just one question, Bryling asked. Wolfskull Cave is far from the main road between Dragonbridge and Solitude. Why would you be related to anyone passing through here? We don't really pass through this place, my lady, but down the road, there's a cave that leads to a snowy grotto. We use that place to preserve many crops and provisions, which we pay half of it to Solitude as annual taxes. The man replied, I see. This is not just a matter of safety, but also a huge issue. Bryling nodded. Thane John, it was wise of you to hear this man's plea. John nodded without saying anything. He then prepared the group to go into Wolfskull Cave and deal with whatever is causing the disturbances. The entrance of this cave was narrow, and the group had to go in with a two-man formation. As the most efficient in the group, John and Bryling took the lead. I sense signs of true life and false life, John said mysteriously. And in Nordic, Bryling asked, living and undead. Around 7 in total right after the corner. John replied. Bryling immediately held Dawnbreaker with her 2 hands and nodded to him. All right, I'll greet them first, John said and started to evoke his spells. He formed multiple wheels of fire and light energies, then kept swirling them around before letting them run on the ground. The wheels of Magicka started running like loose wheels and accurately turned around the corner before each finding a target to explode at. Now, Bryling rushed ahead aware of every step she made, and once she got to the targets, she picked on any of those who were left with Dawnbreaker. Some of the Draugr were still functional, and one of them had the ability to cast frost spikes. The guards could clearly see Bryling swing the blade at the spell that targeted her to shatter it in one swing before splitting the Draugr into 2 and turning it to dust. I'll disable the traps ahead. Make sure to at least capture some necromancers alive. John instructed the guards and walked ahead with Bryling. They did a very good job at devastating the enemies they faced down the cavern until they finally saw what needed to be seen. As the group reached a point in the cave, they found themselves overlooking a large grotto that expanded massively underground. In the sides, a powerful stream of Magicka was gathering from all corners of the cave to the center. In its middle, a third-era military structure stood tall and seemed to have been a part of some secret underground fortification. The streams of Magicka gathered in the middle of the cave, and voices of chanting became clear from this distance. Wolf Queen, hear our call and awaken. We summon Potima. We summon Potima. Long have you slept the dreamless sleep of death, Potima. No longer. Hear us, Wolf Queen. We summon you. We summon Potima. This was enough for everyone witnessing this scene to simply shiver in fear from the thought that just can't help but cross the mind. The summoning of the undead ghost of Potima, the Wolf Queen of Solitude, the most brutal queen in the history of Skyrim. We need to stop them. Bryling was about to rush in, but John held her shoulder. Slowly, we still have time, John said. The ritual is not in its final phase yet. With the professional magic casters saying that even the superstitious Nords have to listen as they are up against a force that truly fears. John looked around carefully and deduced that they are on a high ground advantage for now. See the necromancers down there? John instructed the guards, aim your bows and draw on my signal. The ritual seemed to be far from over, and John had his own plan for it. But first, he needed to get rid of the numbers. Draw. Loose. 20 arrows descended upon the necromancer apprentices, and the undead guarding the old structures, instantly killing 3 of the mages. On the other hand, the undead gathered at that spot didn't feel a thing. They are yours. John then spoke to Bryling. With Dawnbreaker, Bryling descended off the old ruins and took a swing with the sword and a Draugr charging up towards them. Dawnbreaker shone with brilliant light as it crushed through the Draugr. One wouldn't imagine a blade crushing anything instead of slicing, but the holy power encasing the sword was enough to devastate the undead. As the sword was done with the Draugr, the remaining of its corpse was flung away and exploded with fire in a power akin to the spell of corpse explosion. Another round of arrows followed on with John, ordering the guards to target the enemies coming from a gate in the ruins, which narrowed the target area and did a lot of damage. To add salt to the wounds, he cast Flame Wall on the ground at that choke point, and all the undead that charged recklessly were badly burnt before they met their end on Dawnbreaker's edge. We summoned Potima. As the fight got heated down the ruins, and the necromancers threw all the undead they had against the intruders, the ritual masters intensified their ritual and started pouring all their power into it. Lord John, I don't feel good about this, Bryling shouted. Let's push forward. Qehuld Haas. John replied and shouted the words of armor, might, and health. This shout called battle state fortified all the guards around him in addition to Bryling and himself with enough aura to protect and boost them. Axes and shields. Take no prisoners. He commanded the guards afterward. It goes without saying that John has made a strong impression on those guards enough for him to give commands despite holding no official authority over them and in the presence of their superior, Bryling. The 20 guards dropped their bows, and like Nordic raiders, they charged ahead, shouting for Sovngarde and for Skyrim. John added the spell of courage in order to inspire them more and picked a sword to join the fun until what he was waiting for finally happened. From deep within the bones of this cursed cave, a terrifying chill started to transmit with a magica around the place, and as if a great entity was present, all the guards felt the urge to stand together back to back in order to face this greater threat. Yes, a lazy voice spoke from all the edges of the cave. Yes, it spoke again with less laziness this time and more excitement. "Return me to this realm," the voice said. It was none other than what the necromancers were summoning, the ghost of the old wolf queen. "Potima septim. As our voices is summon you, the blood of the innocent binds you, wolf queen," the ritual master shouted as she raised her staff. "Summoned with words, bound by blood." All the necromancers around the cave started to chant in order to hasten the summoning of the old ghost. "What?" The voice of the wolf queen echoed in the cave, displaying her surprise. "What are you doing?" And the surprise turned into rage. "You fools! You cannot bind me to your wills." And the rage turned into resistance. "Summoned with words, bound by blood." The necromancers chanted repeatedly as they knew that if they managed to bind and harness the power of the Wolf Queen, they would immediately win against the intruders. Lord John, Bryling felt true fear at that moment. "I know. The sword," John shouted, and in a second, both of them exchanged their swords. John had Dawnbreaker in his hand and finally decided to stop screwing around now that Potima is present. "Greed, be ready. Lust, cover the sounds. Gluttony, wipe out the necromancers in that tower. Wrath, take hold of the undead and make sure the guards can come up, but injure nobody. Pride, turn into a bracelet and gather as much magica into this sword." For a rare moment, John utilized his presence and artifacts all at once and unleashed an unimaginable power. The power gathered around Dawnbreaker by the action of pride, and then amassed a terrifying amount of light energy into the blade. John aimed the blade towards where the ghost of Potima was present and unleashed a blast that was akin to the power of a dragon's breath. The attack barely grazed the ghost of Potima, which wailed and struggled to put a complete halt to the ritual. John then rushed ahead of the group and started climbing the runs while cutting down any necromancer and draugr in his path. "Support Lord John Dare," Bryling shouted in order to follow him, but a strong wave of undead skeletons blocked their path and made it harder to reach him. "I'll be fine," John shouted and kept going. There, he arrived at the sealing place of Queen Potima, where the ritual was taking place. The necromancers on the top all saw him coming and were about to piss themselves at the sight of him. The ritual master couldn't let go of the spell, so her apprentices had to defend her knowing that they stood no chance from the start. "Kill them." Suddenly, all the undead gathered around moved against the will of their summoners. "What? Ow! Impossible." But right away, the summons turned against the summoner and slaughtered them immediately. This was the power of wrath, the bone colossus which lords over the skeletal undead. John arrived at the ritual master, which was unable to move, yet lost all her focus, and looked at him with terrified eyes. "Impressive work," he said and stood behind her. "Let me give you some assistance." John put his hands on the woman's head and started to use magic in the Daedric tongue. His words were terrifying as his power seeped into the brain of the helpless ritual master and erased everything that ever existed in there. "Your Highness," John said, addressing Potima, "a vessel of living flesh and no memory, maybe unworthy but sufficient for now." "Treacherous bastard," Potima replied, "you possess that accursed blade. You harmed me intentionally. Oh, and I apologize. I had to make it look that way in order to get the attention of my allies away." John replied as he showed sincerity. "Umph. Cunning man, if you were planning to capture me through the mortal body, you should have hidden that black soul gem in your pocket better than this." Oh. Potima's words caused John to be confused for a second, since he had no such plan nor any black soul gem on him at the moment. His plan was to engrave an enchantment on the ritual master's body in order to make Potima. Cunning bitch. John immediately realized what had happened. Potima just bluffed her way out to make him slip, and before he even realized it, she freed herself completely from the ritual. But it was too late. The ghost of the old which had completely freed itself and escaped through the hidden tunnels of the mountain. Eh. John let out a short laugh and shook his head. That went completely the other way. Then, with a swift slash, he beheaded the ritual master and carried her head, walking down with it to Bryling. The undead crumbled back to eternal rest, and John handed the sword and the head to Bryling. "Nice strategy, my lady. You bravely stopped the resurrection of the evil ritual." Then he went on with his mind busy with the Wolf Queen. Chapter 635, The Messenger. And so, we can secure the front gate, the spiral stairs to the dockyard, and the dockyard itself, Brina Marilis said as she pointed at certain areas on the map. "The Legion can't spare that many men. We need to keep a heavy watch on the castle, especially with the increase of the spies coming from literally everywhere." Legate Rika seemed reluctant. "I'll allow it." General Tullius approved of what Brina Marilis wanted. They have a plan to start holding the foundations of Solitude before it becomes too late. Earlier in the war, it was easy to confront the Stormcloak Rebellion and even capture Ulfric's Stormcloak, but after the first winter, it became increasingly difficult to fight the snow-loving Nords even with Nord legionaries. The perspective of the imperial authority of Skyrim started to aim for a war of attrition at this rate. Solitude was going to be a major supplier in this kind of war, but they needed total control of it first. It was easy to control Jarl Elisif in the past, since she was a pushover and bore vengeance against Ulfric's Stormcloak. That was until someone killed her and left this important seat vacant for greed and opportunity. From this perspective, the court of the Blue Palace is incompetent in many ways, but they have a strong backer who stands against the war. John Dare is that backer, and he jumped on the opportunity to put his candidate, Thane Bryling, on the throne. Meanwhile, the Legion figured out that by controlling the major points of the city, they would completely control it. Sparing Imperial soldiers to act as guards was an act that would cause a bad reputation to the Legion, but the city guards were on the side of Thane Bryling. The Legion took a bad move at first and tried to undermine them by kicking them out of the castle where their barracks was, which made Thane Bryling take them under her wing and empty her manor for them as the new barracks. Right after the departure of Thane Bryling and John Dare, General Tullius tried to open the barracks back and invited Captain Aldous, head of the guards, to go back to the castle, but Falk Firebeard showed up and caused trouble with the Imperial messenger, saying if the general has anything to say to the honest guardsmen of Hafengar, he better come down here and say it himself. This blocked all the attempts to reconcile with the guards or regain control over them. "So, what did our eyes report?" Brina Marilis asked the general, who looked at Legate Rika in return. Thane John Dare and Thane Bryling mobilized the 20 guards towards the west and entered an old Daedric shrine. Legate Rika reported. "That can't be good," Brina Marilis said. "John Dare is an expert at dealing with the Daedra, and whenever he is reported to run into one, he would emerge with a new kind of power. Can we use it against them as an offense against peace?" General Tullius asked. "From what we know, the shrine belongs to the Daedric Prince Meridia. She is very popular in High Rock, as we know, and her worshippers are actually helpful when it comes to fighting the undead." Legate Rika reported. "Did they part from the shrine with anything that looked eye-catchy?" Brina Marilis asked. The report noted that they offered some sort of a gem to the statue of Meridia before entering and came out with a sword that had an aura of its own. Any attempts to get a hold of that gem seemed impossible due to the imposing power of the Daedra, and the sword is on Thane Bryling's hand, which will prove difficult to take away even if John Dare isn't around. "Well, that sounds ominous." General Tullius didn't like the report. What's in the next one? They traveled further north and entered an old cave. Our spies noticed undead remains on the cave's entrance, and it got very noisy all of a sudden. Thane John and Thane Bryling came out 2 hours after entering with 3 individuals chained up as prisoners. Our spies suspect that they subjugated some sort of necromancers. I see a pattern here, Brina Marilis said. During his rise, John Dare hunted down the pirates and the bandits that were terrorizing Winterhold to gain recognition before becoming a Thane. He also had to invite a lot of people with him so that he could get witness doing his heroics. You easily admit he is doing heroics. General Tullius remarked on the words of Brina Marilis. Don't get me wrong, General. John Dare is indeed a hero of Skyrim, and someone who is worthy of respect. However, he is a political brute and has no respect for authority. His heroics made him delusional and dangerous. While you may be somewhat right, my lady, I truly beg to differ. John Dare has broken through unimaginable odds to get Winterhold where it is today. If he was any weaker, he would have been preyed upon by rivals. Legate Rika refused Brina's statement. In order to save one city, John Dare risked the livelihood of the citizens of 3 other cities. Brina replied, Dawnstar docks completely failed. Skyrim's eastern imports shifted from both Solitude and Windhelm all to Winterhold, and he became the definite warden of the Sea of Ghosts. The freedom of trade was completely shattered, and anyone who wants to make a living in the sea has to work for either him or one of the big companies. All right. General Tullius stopped the 2 ladies from clashing any further. We are not here to discuss John Dare for the 8th's sake. We want to appoint a Jarl friendly to our cause, which is you, Lady Brina, and prevent the throne from being taken by anyone else. I hope that you 2 are on board. I am. Yes, General Tullius. So, any more reports on the movement of our political rivals? The general asked. For now, a report to Legate Rika. A voice came from outside, interrupting the legate's reply. It just arrived. She immediately went out, opened a report, skimmed through it, and returned with a not-so-pleased face. What? The general asked. Thane John and Thane Bryling headed further north, rather than returning all the way to the frozen coast. Free to Snow Bear, which eventually ended up chasing our scouts. Until the scouts returned to the trail, they found that Thane John had captured 2 more prisoners. Hugravens. Hugravens? Brina Marilis showed a confused face. This far up north? Even the general found it bizarre. After that, they stopped by an old shrine hidden in the mountains for Talos. They offered some belongings of High King Torrig and Jarl Elisif. Now, they are riding fast back towards the city. Silence took over for a while, as nobody could get any reading on the situation. Necromancers, Hugravens, Talos Shrine, nothing connects all of that together. Lady Brina, any thoughts? The general asked the self-proclaimed John Dare expert. As I said, he just does more heroics and drags along his audience. Since there is a strange sword in the hands of Thane Bryling, she is getting those heroics attributed to her. The 20 guards they have are merely there to act as witnesses. He will create as much hype for her to make her the leader of the people. Then, when the Emperor senses his eyes to read the situation, she will be the easy pick. Don't forget that John Dare is already carrying a petition of the people to the Elder Council to appoint her a Jarl. Fine, the general nodded. We will do what we can to take care of those guards. Bribery, transference to the Legion, all the way to silencing them for good. The prisoners are the proof of their so-called heroics. We will make sure to take them to our dungeons rather than the palaces. The general said, I know it won't be easy, but make sure it happens, Rika. Yes, sir. Legate Rika responded in high spirits. One last thing, the general continued. Confront John Dare and Bryling respectively about their visit to the Shrine of Talos. Make sure they pay for disobeying imperial law. Legate Rika paused, and Thane Brina seemed bothered. What? However, the general was bothered by the lack of response. With all due respect, sir, I don't think I can obey such an order. Legate Rika replied. What did you just say? The general faced disobedience for the first time in a very long while. Sir, please, I am a legion soldier, and a Nord, Legate Rika conjured up all her courage, not a Thalmer justiciar. Did you just— The general was infuriated by her reply even more. I think what Legate Rika just tried to say is— Thane Brina jumped in hastily while thinking of what to say. This job can't be done by a legionary. Ahem. I think we could just tip the Thalmer attaché that is located here in the castle without doing anything that might sway the public sentiment away from our cause. The general kept staring at Legate Rika intensely before speaking once again. Such disobedience. It won't be forgiven ever again. He said, and I see the point of what Lady Brina said. Make their clash with the Thalmer rats, but don't bring up John Dares when you tip them off. Yes, General. Legate Rika excused herself and left. Oomph. The general was still displeased with how inflexible Rika can be before snorting. Nords. Thane Brina Marilis surely heard him, but she had to keep it in as well. Setting someone up because they had anything to do with Talos was a major taboo between Nords despite how often it occurred. Still, she had to think of something in order to get Legate Rika out of trouble. Do you think any of these slime moves used by politicians will hinder his plans? The general interrupted her chain of thoughts by posing such a question. Undermining his efforts will serve as a good way to buy enough time for our allies in Cyrodiil to get the Imperial Council to make the right decision. Add that to the attempts to stop his envoys from reaching Cyrodiil first. It should be good enough for now. Brina Marilis said, Is there anything to be wary of until that time? The general asked. Spies. Brina replied again. If John Dare is up to the details of our plans, he will rework his own plans to disturb ours. We are not amateurs, Lady Brina. We know how to keep out a few of John Dare's pigeons. The general said with pride before opening up a drawer. The dried fish snacks have run out again. I should have told Rika to bring some on her way back. Cyrodiil, the Imperial City. I truly love this place, John. It is so perfect to raise children. I am glad it is to your liking, wife. The schools, the buildings, the gardens. While I have missed Skyrim's tundra the past 2 months, we can make a decent living here managing the company's outpost. Well, it doesn't have that much meat over here, but I'm sure we'll manage to import some. Oh, silly husband. I worked as a tavern maiden for years. You think I can't brew you mead? That, my dear, is a blessing to any true Nord if his wife can brew mead. You know what? I'll buy you a mead house outside the city after you recover from giving birth. The husband put his hand on his wife's rising belly as he warmly smiled at her. Oh, John. The wife smiled warmly. All right, I will have to go now. The husband remembered something. It is about time I go meet them. Right, the 3rd day after the news arrives at the city. John, you will do this, don't worry. Bah, I am not worrying. I am the Dare Dragon Company's executive manager in Cyrodiil. This position needs a heart of steel, not some milk drinker. Quit stalling and go already. They must be waiting. The husband had to part with the wife, displaying a bitter face. After all, this is the 3rd day after the news of the death of Jarl Elisif arrives at the capital of Cyrod. The petition of the citizens of Hafengar to appoint was transferred to him by magic not long ago, and it carried the hopes of the people to the Elder Council. This document was supposed to be carried by a caravan, but John Dare's big diversion was nothing but a complete hoax, as usual. The ones with whom he could trust this document were his old friends and the most diplomatic associates he has, John Battleborn and Alfina Greymane, the ones currently present under the shade of the white gold Imperial Tower. Oh. Chapter 636, Setting the Stage. Those are the guards you asked for. Captain Aldous said came closer towards John. That's 40 of our men under your disposal, sir. No, John replied, just 20. What do you mean, sir? Captain Aldous asked. I am returning the 20 men I borrowed. I will enter the city with the other 20. John said, they won't be recognized for the achievement of following Thane Bryling when she gets to be a Jarl, but what is important is that she will surely recognize their hard work. But why is all that? Why change the men you have with others? The captain couldn't understand what John wanted. Recognition is the problem, Captain. I don't want the Imperial Legion's eyes to recognize them. It is part of a big plan. John said, a big plan. That's what John promised the Court of Solitude. Only none of them anticipated how big this plan actually is. John was planning for this for months, using the assassination attempt on Vittoria to assassinate Jarl Elisif, sending John Battleborn and Alfina Greymane 2 months in advance to Cyrodiil without telling them why, manipulating the Dark Brotherhood through Sir Anna as his agent, and giving leads on the Dark Brotherhood to the Imperial Intelligence Agency in order to cut loose ends once he is done with it. But why is he changing the 20 men that were following him and feign briling with another 20 men? The answer is that he got the news that the Imperial Legion is going to disturb his operation by targeting those 20 men with all manner of methods. The 20 men that followed him and feigned briling were basically the witnesses of liberating the Temple of Meridia, acquiring the Holy Blade Dawnbreaker, getting rid of the necromancers that tried to resurrect the Wolf Queen Potima, and getting rid of the ghost of the Wolf Queen. Those 4 achievements are nothing short of heroic to the people of Solitude, since they display courage, leadership, resourcefulness, and strength. John found out that General Tullius was planning to undermine those achievements through all sorts of tricks, and so he prepared in return. If the general plans to take away the witnesses, John will replace them with others which will make the rumors still flow. The guards may not be pleased that they are not getting recognized, and their achievements will be taken by the other 20 guards, but John personally explained to them what will happen and how to persuade them one by one. That is why he had to take a detour to go hunt some Hagravens and openly visit a shrine of Talos. He needed a physical face for the evil that exists under the hold, and a little trap for the Imperials so that he can make a scene. Of course the trap was as obvious as day, but he just needed to keep them occupied with something to be wary of. After all, he needed to extract as much information from the commanding chamber of the Imperial Legion where the general plots for his next move. John sent his best spy in there, and she has already made the place her own. Nefertiti's power to occupy any place was never this good before. That aside, John was actually worried about Brina Marilis. The woman's character is as straight as a sword, and her attitude is as sour as a whole sack of lemon, especially towards him. John wanted to recruit that woman many times and make her move from Dawnstar to Winterhold, but she didn't like his offers. Dawnstar was her proud home, and despite the political childishness shown by Jarl Skald the Elder, she still remained loyal to her home. It is praiseworthy and all, but the sour lemon between John Dare and Brina Marilis was only bound to grow into a lemon orchid after John completely took over the sea business. Originally in the game's plot, Brina Marilis was the opposition presence of the Stormcloaks in Dawnstar, and she was to replace Jarl Skald if he was ever removed by the Imperial Legion. That, however, became a pipe dream, and she was invited to Solitude in order to be the face of a legion on Solitude's Jarl throne. However, John didn't kill an innocent woman in order for the Imperial Legion to have its way with the city. And with that attitude in mind, John accompanied Thane Bryling back to Solitude on the head of 20 guards, dragging 2 Hagravens and carrying a visibly magical artifact. For that, a display of achievements was necessary, but the drama had to come first. Hold it right there. The Imperial soldiers on the city gate stopped the group and seemed not willing to let things pass easily. "It's all right, boys. What's the matter?" John asked as he effortlessly descended from his Atronak horse. "Sorry, sir, but you can't roam around the city while dragging those monstrosities around." The officer on the gate pointed towards the Hagravens that were brought in chains. John looked at the 2 old, hideous things, then back to the officer. "Really? Goddamn, soldier. And here I thought some reinforced chains with state-of-the-art enchantments would stop them. Truly, I wouldn't have known what I could do without you." John replied, showing a slight grin to the officer. The Imperial officer kept putting on a stern face under his plumed helmet and didn't get triggered by John. After all, he was specially placed here to annoy John within the bounds of law, and he was the first of many along the way. I get it, officer." John nodded. "These Hagravens are suspects of a hideous crime. In their cave, We found evidence that may be related to the murder of our late Jarl Elisif. We found an old comp that once belonged to the Jarl with a few strands of hair, sheets with blood spots, and many ugly trinkets that all scream black magic. We really wanted to burn those witches in the public square. I am sorry, sir, but this is against the law. The officer refused. Ah, I see. John nodded again. Then what do you think we should do, officer? We shall behead them on the spot. The officer responded and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, and as if they were ready for this, a bunch of Imperial soldiers showed up carrying a great sword and intending to make fast work of the Gravens. No, hold it right there. John waved his hands and stopped them immediately. Believe me, you don't want to do that. What do you mean, sir? The officer interfered fiercely. These monstrosities are not entering the city, nor will be allowed to be thrown back into the wilds. They must die here and now. I know. Just hold on for a damn second. He then approached the officer, put his arm on his shoulder, and pulled him closer. It is truly depressing to say, but you're worsening the situation for me here. Tell you what, you can have this and call yourself a champion of the gate. John suddenly called out a large sack and held it with one hand in front of the officer. The sack was both heavy and clicky, indicating that its content was a ton of coins. The sight of John Dare attempting to bribe the city gate officer in broad daylight was just baffling and made the people gathered around whisper and look at each other weirdly. Even the city gate officer was stunned and didn't know what to do. He was told to hinder John Dare and strip him of his trump cards before he entered the city. He was told nothing about attempting to arrest John Dare, who is one of the most powerful and influential men on the continent. Sir, I can't possibly think about or even consider this, the officer said. Seriously, this is nothing at all. Just take it and then make your superiors see it too. You may need it, guys. John said. Everyone's jaws simply dropped. John's bribery was even meant for this officer's superior. And he just said this openly. Sir, this is unthinkable. The officer responded. Deliver it for the general, too. He's a man with keen eyes for such things. John added, even bribing the general? John Dare has just reached a level of boldness that was never seen in Skyrim and its history. Sir, I'm sure you know you're someone important, but you can't do that. The Imperial Legion doesn't operate this way. We have our pride. The officer couldn't stand it anymore. The situation seemed to take an unimaginable turn, but seeing Thane Breiling not commenting on John's actions made many question her. The brave officer who stood against bribery and turned down such a large sum was greatly admired, especially in front of the imposing John Dare. Meanwhile, John Dare was making the face. Bruh, what on God's green are you talking about? John said, and then tore the sack with his hand. I really didn't want anyone to see it, but here you go. What was inside the sack was no gold, silver, or gems. It was a head. A Hagraven's severed head, and the head was alive. The head was held by chains that covered it thoroughly and restricted its mouth. Those who saw the head could see its evil eye turning around and gazing at them with pure malice, as she was unable to say anything. It was also understood that these chains are the things that gave the money illusion. I don't know about you, man, but I've never encountered a Hagraven that doesn't die if you cut its head. This thing is super unholy, and we need a priest to purify the fuck out of it in order to make a proper execution. John said. He wasn't bribing the officer. He was showing him the seriousness of the situation. The officer felt like trying to process a situation as he was too close to John and could see the faint smile John had. It seems like John had him playing on his hand from the very beginning. All right, my lord. We shall notify the high priest right away. The officer couldn't help but comply before turning around. Open the gate. Passing the first hurdle on the way, John was simply warming up to bullshit his way through the city. The living head trick was a neat one, though. It didn't just end with the lowly gate officer. The party was stopped right after entering by many other officers. The Legion enlistment officer was the first to drop by and claimed that 11 guards of the ones who went on the raiding party seemed to have enlisted to join the Legion some time ago. John knew that this situation was true and not faked since many guards try to join the Legion at some point, and he has no right to stop that. However, the thing he did yesterday night when he switched the guards secretly was for this. No matter which name the enlistment officer called, they were not present at John's party. The officer checked again and again until he eventually gave up with a sour face. He seemed to have got the impression that when he requested the list of names from the barracks earlier yesterday, the names he was given were not true. After that, a Thalmor justiciar showed up to make trouble for the party, but for some weird reason, that justiciar had no idea that John Dare was the one leading the party at all. It seemed that the Imperial Legion ratted out on the party and carefully covered the fact that John Dare was a part of it. John didn't need any bullshit at this point, since all he did was to raise his hand and wave it to slap the justiciar, but the elf was fast enough to disappear from sight. It is known that John Dare treats the Thalmor as sworn enemies and kills them whenever he runs into them. The fourth hurdle, by far, was the most troublesome one. It seemed that the previous one was put to shake Breiling's momentum, but this is where the showdown shall be. In Solitude's central plaza, General Tullius and Thane Brina Marilis, along with a score of influential people, all gathered to meet with Thane Breiling. The scene attracted the eyes of many people, and it was obvious that a scheme was brewing. Those who know the inner workings of Solitude knew very well that both parties are of absolute power, thus there won't be bloodshed in this scene. Moreover, the rumors that Thane Breiling conquered 2 undead crypts with John Dare were already flying around the city with no wings. Counterpropaganda was also spread that John Dare was the one conquering, while Thane Breiling was merely a spectator, but that didn't go well as planned by the Imperials, since Breiling has a fiery personality that everyone knows about. But what was surprising was the rumors spreading about Thane Brina Marilis, who was said to have subjugated a gang of pirates outside the city and seemed to be cracking on the location of the assassins of Jarl Lissif. It seemed that the two ladies were about to have a relentless argument that day. Chapter 637. The True Face of Evil. In a world where evil has many faces, openly punishing evil was a sort of public amusement. Beheading outlaws, burning witches, and whipping criminals were ordinary and welcome sights. Hagravens are notorious for their ways in witchcraft, and many simpletons would usually go and secretly meet them for all sorts of spells and potions. Things like a spell to make a man love a woman over another woman, a spell to kill the child of a certain couple, a spell to destroy a relationship between two lovers, and even spells to make men or women impotent. These were the sorts of shitty services Hagravens were happy to offer. However, the more shocking thing was the number of people who were willing to pay for such services. As if the entire world has lost all of its humanity, the number of spells gathered by the guards was just innumerable. Lay them on the ground over there. Don't touch them with your bare skin, and wait for the priests to come and do their proper work. Thane Breiling commanded the guards following her as they entered the plaza together. In there, the one frowning upon such a situation was General Tullius and Thane Brina Marilis, who were in town for similar reasons as John Dare and Thane Breiling. I'm terribly sorry, but this place is locked for an execution an hour from now. An Imperial legionary advanced towards Breiling and tried to stop the guards from entering the execution grounds. It's all right. We'll be taking things from here on out. However, a big hand held the legionary's shoulder and almost threw him off balance, but kept a good grip on him still. Who's? The soldier wanted to get his hand on his blade, but as soon as his eyes spotted the owner of the hand holding his shoulder, he knew there was a big problem. A smiling redhead with immense power, or rather, the smiling redhead with immense power, John Dare. A man who tends to solve his issues with power and money. In other words, something beyond a normal legionary's pay grade. I believe you are putting your hand on a legion soldier's body during his duty, Thane John of Winterhold. A voice came to John's ears. Is there a law against that? John asked as he turned around and recognized the one who spoke, Thane Brina of the Pale. Actually, there is, she said. Actually, I didn't know. John replied before letting go of the legion soldier. The soldier moved away immediately as he kept rubbing his shoulder, but he seemed fine. And please, evacuate this area, since it is reserved for official business, she said and turned away. I'm sure a normal citizen has no authority to convey official orders, he said. Oh, she turned around with an amused face. I happen to be a civilian advisor of the Imperial Legion. So, from a Legion official to a normal citizen of Skyrim, please leave this area as you happen to be obstructing official business. Oh, John returned the same amused face. And I happen to be a deputy for Thane Bryling working with the city guards. You know, I am something of an official myself. You're a Thane deputy? She asked, looking at him up and down. And you're a civilian advisor. John smiled. We're both moving up in the world, ain't we? You're still obstructing official Boosie. She joined her arms together, but John cut her words short. Piss off, he said while still maintaining his cool smile before turning immediately perplexed. I'm sorry. Did I just speak my mind out loud? God, this witchcraft has some nasty effects. Brina's face hardened as John kept fooling around. She failed to stop his entourage of guards from entering the place and laying out all the spells and witch hexes on the ground. General Tullius had to intervene himself at this point. I see some intruders are still here. He came from behind Thane Brina, Thane Bryling, Thane John. Please take your business elsewhere. Wow, you're really so short up close, John said once he saw the general before holding his mouth, as if he said something that he wasn't supposed to say. Everyone lost their words as John made an awkward face and the general's expressions turned dark. I am sorry, General. Thane John was infected by some witchcraft that Thane Bryling immediately intervened as she looked at John and not believing that she was following up on his bullshit. He speaks out what he thinks without restraint. That's a dangerous curse, John added. Indeed, Bryling nodded. Very bad curse. The execution grounds are closed, the general said as he turned expressionless. While the area is wide, we can have joint executions. Celebrate together, John said cheerfully. After the official business is done, you could do whatever you want with those things. The general refused to give John a leeway as he looked disdainfully at the Hagravens. Actually, we are here officially. Bryling came forward. We are using the execution grounds. The general was displeased with Bryling talking that way. You're overstepping your position, Thane, he said. My position is to enforce law and maintain order, General, she replied. And from where I stand, your actions of occupying the execution grounds for a few criminals you caught in my hold is vulgar and overstepping the jurisdiction of the guards of Hafingar and the Court of Solitude. By law, a Legion soldier can detain and arrest, but the criminal would be handed to the local authority to be tried and pass judgment on. Thane Bryling spared nothing against General Tullius, which was wild compared to how things used to run in the past, even during the days of Elisif. Damn girl. John spoke then acted as if he said that unintentionally. Everyone ignored John, trying not to fall to his provocations, but it seemed that Bryling was ready for a brawl. Those criminals are pirates who attacked a Legion ship, Thane Brina said. Therefore, they are to be punished by the Legion and within its jurisdiction. Hoax. John spoke sarcastically but covered his mouth again. Truly sorry. Perhaps the witchcraft infecting Thane John Dare is going to be problematic. Shouldn't you be escorted to a place to rest? General Tullius asked. And miss all the trash talking? No way. John said happily, but acted as if he shouldn't have said that. Last warning. Take your business away. The general almost became too annoyed by John's act. I wonder why the Legion is occupying these execution grounds when they have their castle ground. John asked. It is closed for secret drills. Thane Bryling mocked them alongside John. Last warning, Thanes. The general had enough as he put his hand on the hilt of his sword. Lord John, Lady Bryling. But immediately, the place was swarmed with hold guards led by Captain Aldous. They came in numbers and seemed serious and ready for business. Brina Marilis immediately held the arm of the general away from the hilt and started whispering something to the general that if they were to act hostile in front of some guards, this would nip her run for the Jarl position in the bud. It seems that our Imperial friends are denying us the public execution grounds, Thane Bryling said. Fine, we will move over there. Bryling pointed at a vacant spot in the middle of the road, not too far from the execution ground. The thing which made both Thane Brina and General Tullius feel very proud was that they pushed their opponents back. Plant the burning poles. Captain Aldous ordered the guards. Sir, the priests have arrived to purify the curses. A guard reported. Fine. Don't hold anything back. Tie up the Hagravens to the poles and get the priests to work. The moment both General Tullius and Brina celebrated the fact that they managed to chase away John Dare and Thane Bryling, they noticed that where the burning poles were located was blocking the way to the execution grounds. Complaining won't work, since it is not against the law to occupy the street by an official for any matter they see fit, especially if that official is a landlord with the scale of Thane Bryling. But the situation has escalated too fast to stop at the moment. With the arrival of the priests from the Temple of the Divines, a chaotic situation occurred. This hex was laid by the Hagraven Anthenotha in the name of the Lady of Rot Namara, that Elka of Dragonstone loses her sight. The hex carries desecration for the name of Lord Akatosh and is considered sacrilege. A priest announced, No, how could this happen? How evil! The situation was merely beginning, and many people started to crowd around the burning sticks while the priest started unsealing the spells and going over them. A witchcraft spell is done differently from usual spell casting for it to have its effects. A witch would gather power through many mediums, but she always needs a trace of her prey, be it a few strands of hair, some clipped nails, blood on a sheet of cloth, or even broken teeth. The witch would then start putting those traces in a spell and draw power from oblivion. They would use rituals in the name of certain Daedric princes to let this magic flow from oblivion to Mundus. After that, the contract happens. The contractor, who is usually a person, specifies the kind of harm they wish to fall on the victim, and the witch writes it with Daedric script. They also must insult the divine which the victim worships, and praise the Daedra that will be the source of the curse. In other words, the contractor and the witch must commit sacrilege against the divines and do a ritual for the Daedra in order to let this curse befall. The name of the contractor is always written in the spell, but the priests couldn't utter it out loud. Obviously, it would cause public disorder if such secrets were revealed. However, some could guess who is who. The contractors' names were listed and sent to the guards' headquarters in order to detain them later on. Either way, the situation continued until nightfall. Half of the city was crowded over the place, and no one even glanced over the boring pirate execution held by the Legion. Still, it was a depressing display for humanity at its worst. A brother cursing his brother with impotence in order to hog out the inheritance with his kids. A sister cursing his sister to make her skin wither so that she can marry instead. A woman cursing another that all her children die at birth. A woman cursing another that she would never marry. A merchant cursing his rival with poverty. A fisherman cursing another with bad luck. Too much ugliness. Too much unfairness. Between the victims, not everyone knew who would wish them this much harm, and they kept wailing and screaming for the priests while demanding to reveal the contractors. Among the gathering people, many hid their faces as they knew what they had done and wished not to be recognized. But the high priest eventually came out to address these matters. Whoever has contracted a witch for a hex, may the divines curse you and kick you out of their mercy. O good people, those who contract the power of the Daedra will always receive a backlash once that contract is broken, and the divines will punish them greatly for disturbing the natural order and insulting the gods. Rejoice, brothers and sisters, for the divines are as just as they are merciful. Thank you, High Priest. John jumped on the stage behind the priest right away. I was also contacted with a hex, and it was no joke, folks. It was no joke at all. John turned around and winked to Brina, who was watching from far away. Of course, it was no joke at all, since he wasn't joking when he threw some insults at her earlier. Either way, I think it is time for you to heal and get back to your lives. Thanks to the good gesture of Lady Bryling, John dragged Thane Bryling closer and raised her hand that was holding Dawnbreaker, The Dare Dragon Company's Dare Pharmacy has been ordered to cooperate with the Temple of Solitude to offer high-grade healing tonics and medicines for the victims of this vile magic. We are now ready to punish the evil witches with the power of this mighty holy sword. John grabbed the sheath and removed it off the sword to show the beautiful and elegant Dawnbreaker. Bryling held the blade upwards and contemplated its beauty for a while, thinking of the actions she had taken while accompanying John. It was nothing wrong at all, but she employed many things to her benefit. She has gained popularity and achieved enough merits, but it wasn't as selfless as she would always do. But it was fun. Now all she needed to do was to light the mounds of firewood under the burning poles with the fire that comes from the sword's enchantment and deliver justice upon the enemies of the divine. My lady, my lord, wait. But something out of their plan happened. A priest of Akatosh, who was one of the 8 priests working on unsealing the hexes, rushed from his spot towards John and Bryling. "What's wrong, Brother Varric?" Bryling asked. You need to see this," he said, and opened one of the hexes to John and Bryling. It was thick with the smell of urine, which the witches would use as an ingredient in their unholy contracts, but the nasty smell meant that it was not an old one. It was also written in Daedric letters, had a lot of blonde strands of hair, written all in circles, and centered with the sigil of Bothia. On its edges, it has the sigils of Talos, Kinnereth, Arche, and Mara all drawn while flipped over, indicating disrespect. Holy shit, John couldn't help but curse. "What does it say?" Bryling asked, as she was incapable of reading Daedric. John looked around and saw that the noises had died down. He must announce what's written now that the priest knows what's in it too. "Curses and bad omens. Death befalls all but the timeless. Bring disorder by death. In the name of Bothia, prince of deceit and conspiracy. Let Talos, who offers kingship, topple off his throne. Let Kinnereth, who offers healing, be blinded away from the sick. Let Arche, who carries the souls, offer no rest. And let Mara, who offers protection, wail over Elisif of solitude, as she dies a horrible death." The words were so sacrilege, but John realized how awful this all turned out to be. Someone cursed Elisif with a death curse, and he was the one who sent Jelinar to deliver the killing blow. It almost shocked Solitude to its core. Not almost. It completely shocked Solitude as the people looked at John with pale faces and sunken hearts. Even Brina Marilis, who stood watching it all from afar, and General Tullius, who was returning to the castle, all turned towards him. And they all waited for the name of the killer. The contractor. The one that played this whole situation from the backstage and instigated disorder. The contractor is the great hidden one, Lot 7GN. John immediately snatched Dawnbreaker from Bryling's hands and aimed the sword at the night sky with a terrifying amount of magicka. A beam of light rose from the blade and formed a pillar that pierced through the skies. The light hit a certain height and then expanded in a circular burst that illuminated the night sky as if it was the time of day for a short few seconds. These few seconds were enough for the entire Solitude to witness it all. A dragon far in the sky. A dark one similar to the color of night, flying gracefully in the sky without a single roar. It was there for a second before flapping his wings at maximum power and disappearing back in the darkness without a trace. Was an illusion projected by John Dare? No, it is not. It was a true dread hidden in the sky that they all felt equally. Leader of the dragon cult's secret dragon horde, the 5th in line from Alduin in the chain of command, the cunning dragon that fights without a shred of dignity and manipulates kings and jarls to fight against each other. The great hidden one, Lot 7 Gain. Chapter 638, Crisis in Solitude 1. This is unbearable. Unbearable. A dragon plots to murder a jarl and devise a plot? You want me to believe that? General Tullius shouted as he strode left and right in the throne hall of the Blue Palace. It is quite hard to believe, yes, but Thane John has shown us the truth of the matter. Sybil Stentor refuted the general's frustrated remarks. But it is still hard to believe. It feels as if the world is getting stranger. Politics with elves I can handle, but dragons. Legate Rika took a seat and put her helm down as she seemed lost in thoughts. I know what it seems like, but Thane John always told us time and time again that dragons are no brainless beasts. All of us heard the stories of the intellect of the dragons. Is it hard to imagine them plotting and scheming? Thane Bryling said, but why can't just a dragon come from the sky? Use his superior strength and speed to kill one powerless human like Lady Elisif in plain sight, rather than all the scheming and witchcraft? John Dare is a wizard, and I know he employs magic a lot to achieve his purposes. And let's not forget that he commands a beast that looks like a dragon. Brina Marilis attacked John immediately. Are you mad? Thane John has exposed something that we all felt. The presence of a dragon. I don't think there's magic that can fake such a thing. Falk Firebeard responded aggressively. God damn it. Thane John this, Thane John that. Why can't the lot of you speak a single sentence without mentioning him at least twice? Are you all officials from court for real, or are you just some twats that follow whatever that man says? General Tullius couldn't endure it anymore and started shouting. General, this is disrespectful. Falk Firebeard lashed back. Really? Then tell me, Falk, in this time of emergency, where in oblivion is that dear Thane John of yours? Brina Marilis asked. I'm here. The response came directly from John, whom no one expected to be around. As they all looked in his voice's direction, they discovered that he was sitting behind some wooden room divider with a ton of maps and papers around him. The group moved and watched what he was up to, which added more to their confusion. He hung a big map on the room dividers and started putting notes, drawings, pins, and strings all over that map. From what it seemed, he was trying to figure out something regarding the current predicament, as many of the small notes he put on the map carried words like Jarl Elisif, the Dragon Cult, Dark Arts, the Dark Brotherhood, Vittoria Vici, the Secret Dragon Horde, Alduin the World Eater, and many notes pinned around the map. From what they could tell, he's already started investigating and looking for the missing pieces. What are you doing? General Tullius asked him. Looking for a dragon, John replied. Are you expecting me to believe this facade? General Tullius asked again. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear you. John replied, even calmer than before, without looking at the general's general direction. Stop wasting our time and contact the Dragonborn then. Don't try to act sincerely. We all understand what you're up to. Brina Marilis said as she raised her voice. Good for you. John replied calmly again. Don't you see? Brina Marilis pointed at him. He's doing it again, calculating his winning and losses before deciding whether or not to send his pet Dragonborn after it. This is blasphemous, Bryling retorted at Brina. What gives you the right to point fingers when you are here in solitude for your own benefit as well? I am here to stop this maniac, Brina replied, and he's playing all of you like a fiddle. It was the first time for John to look away from his document and look up towards the people around him. Is that all there is to it? Stop me? John asked. I don't even feel like slowing down, Brina. His smile was there, but sure as hell he wasn't smiling. He wasn't happy or pleased like his usual self, but he was very focused. You see the problem here, right? A dragon wanted the Jarl of Solitude dead, and without even trying to do the effort himself, he just did it. John said. Then hunt it down. Brina spoke back. And here's the problem. You see? You say it. I say him. Do you realize the difference? John asked. Quit lecturing us. Brina didn't want to get dragged in John's circles. You just want them all to worship you, don't you? You hold the dragons on one hand, the Dragonborn on another, and you keep waltzing around Skyrim selling the sickness and its cure. Bravo. Now you figure me out very well. John clapped. People like you know nothing but suspicion and fear. You see the world ending, and you just find someone to blame and make an enemy of. That's being wary of the likes of you. That's being ignorant. You see the sickness dropping people around you, and once you see a cure, the first thing you do is to suspect it. Being wary is good, but don't spread ignorance wherever you go. I won't esti. I am done arguing. John raised his hand and spoke with a voice filled with power. Arguing is fun, but I think I figured out what the dragon is after. Don't even... Brina wasn't interested in what John was about to say, but a hand was raised in front of her face. "What does the dragon want?" General Tullius asked as he interrupted Brina Marilis. "General, this man can't be trusted." Brina Marilis pleaded with the general not to listen. "Enough. If you have something to solve this with, say it. If you don't, I'll hear him." Tullius seemed extremely displeased with the last argument as he turned to John again. "Answer me. The dragon clearly wants us to argue." John said, "Elaborate." "Well, the leaders of Solitude all gathered in one place arguing their brains out, which means that everyone here will miss something important." John elaborated. "So, a diversion tactic?" the general asked. "Yes. Something big is happening. I don't know where, but somehow. The dragon was watching us this entire time, and he knew what we're up to. The death of Jarl Elisif is part of a bigger scheme. The dragons didn't come from the sky and kill the Jarl on their own because they wanted her death to be done by human hands. If that happens, the humans will start doubting each other. That's why the death curse used by them was meant to bring Elisif's demise, and someone acted on it without fully knowing." John said as he realized his plan to assassinate and replace Elisif helped the dragons with their goal. "So it doesn't have to be the dragon cultists." "No, I highly doubt it. They're being wary, and they wouldn't have used the curse if they would do it themselves. Their goal is to keep humans busy with each other." "So you're saying that we're being distracted, but you don't know more?" Sybil Stentor said. "Yes." John nodded. "I haven't done any scrying since the dragon appeared." She said, "I need to go back to my duties then." Sybil Stentor hurried back to her room, and the rest remained. "What else do you know, Thane John? Even the things you are unsure of?" Thane Bryling asked. "The dragon cult is a cult that serves the dragons as—" John was about to reply, but he was interrupted. "We know about the situation of that cult," General Tullius said. "John has spread many messages about the Alduin situation and the dragon crisis during his marketing campaign for the Dragonborn. All right, if the dragon cult is still obsessed with ending this world as we know, their goal is to cause as many casualties as possible to feed Alduin. No thanks to anyone in this room, the Empire and the Stormcloak are barely able to fight each other, so the dragons should be desperate. If Solitude falls into chaos, the Stormcloak will take this opportunity to advance and reignite the war." "So your plan is falling apart?" Brina Marilis asked with a faint, disdainful smile. "Excuse me?" John narrowed his eyes. "You are the one who caused the war to come to such a stalemate. Don't deny it. Now that both sides are barely throwing stones at each other, the dragons would weaken one side enough to make those stones really deadly." Brina explained. As much as he hated it, John only let out a sigh that didn't confirm or deny her claims, but there was no hiding it since he was against the civil war from the start. "But killing Jarl Elisif would only confuse us. It won't achieve anything sensible. Unless," John said and returned back to thinking. "Unless their plans are already in motion without difficulties." Bryling said, "If I were a leader of that third front, my goal would be—" General Tullius thought a bit before looking around. "TSK, this is bad." "The Emperor?" John asked. "If they were to kill His Majesty, it would—" "Not the Emperor." General Tullius shook his head. "We have to worry about ourselves at the moment. The target is us." The insight of General Tullius was strangely on point. "We're all gathered in one place like putting all the eggs in a single basket. Damn it." John caught on immediately. "My lords, my lords." A guard came running towards the throne room as all the figures in there looked towards him. They all felt their hearts sink. "Report, soldier," Thane Bryling responded. "There's a man, an adventurer. He said that he encountered the dragon not too far from the city. He came running to report." The guard said, "Let him in." General Tullius spoke. "No, he can be—" Bryling wanted to stop the general, but was quick to respond. "Trust me," he said, then nodded towards the guard. The guard retreated, and the general looked at everyone present in the room and spoke faintly. "I suppose you all feel it, right?" He then looked at John. "You too?" "Yes." John nodded. "I don't feel anything," Falk Firebeard said. "Exactly." John and General Tullius seemed to be agreeing together. We took the silence for granted, and now we got isolated in the palace. John said, "We are under attack." In front of the eyes of the people present in the court, a frail-looking man walked in while wearing a large cloak that seemed to have been torn and tattered from various spots. "Approach." Thane Bryling called for the man to come up the stairs in order to speak his piece to the lords. 2 stairways were leading up, one left and one right. Both were a replica of the other, so one wouldn't really bother with the choice if he was at an equal distance from both stairs. But that man had to bother because the one on his left was riddled with all sorts of hidden magical traps, while the other one was empty. What sort of test is this? If you're onto someone's trick, you don't make it this obvious. The moment this man hesitates, he will be seen through, and he has already taken a moment to think about his next action, so he has been found out. It wasn't easy to infiltrate Solitude, hide away from a strong court mage that is scrying all the hostile actions inside the hold, wait for the targets to get together, and strike. The plan itself was supposed to be put on hold when the Jarl of Solitude was killed by unknown assassins, and not the Dragon Cult, but the Dragon Overlord decided to go on with the plan either way. And here they all are, facing the targets like they were supposed to be, but their disguise was seen through since only Thane Bryling was the only one to show herself. The man finally dropped the act and took out a small knife. "Guards!" Bryling spoke and raised her hand. "Arrest him!" 2 guards, who were supposedly stationed outside the hall, walked in and unsheathed 2 knives similar to the one held by the assassin. In unison, the 3 of them threw their knives with extreme precision towards Bryling's head, throat, and heart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The knives passed through Bryling, whose body started flickering but seemed completely untouched. Obviously, someone played with illusions. The 3 assassins decided to take the right stairs and immediately rush whoever is up there, but something was way faster than them. The runes which they discovered on the left stairway just a moment ago suddenly started moving and reached the right stairway faster than them. Actually, it wasn't racing them or moving from its place, it was spreading. The runes of the magical script no longer seemed to be trying to hide and filled the walls, halls, and ceilings with an array of circles and colors. Even the ground under the assassin's feet was consumed with runes. It was an array of almost everything, from small novice runes to large expert runes, from powerful destruction runes to harmonious restoration runes. And when the entire fabric of runes was connected together, it started spinning and moving like clockwork. BZZT flashbang. Right from where no one expected, 3 runes were activated and a bolt of lightning, a flash of light, and a burst of fire struck the 3 assassins, leaving them with holes in their bodies that dropped dead and unmoving. Up above the throne hall, John stood as he held his staff with both hands and put all his focus into his spell. Around him was everyone from Solitude's elite. He just displayed a spell that can only be described as a marvel of magic that no one less than an arch-wizard is capable of casting. The spell was called Belly of the Beast, and it was given that name for a good reason, as it was ready to devour everything in its path. But no one was out of the woods yet. 3 down, 100 more to go. Chapter 639, Crisis in Solitude 2. As the ashes of the assassins scattered on the floor, the group walked ahead and saw the destruction that John caused. "We needed to capture them alive," General Tullius said. "You'll have plenty of opportunities," John replied, and as he finished his words, the sound of broken glass was heard. "Help! Killers! Help!" A young palace maid came out from a deep hall from within the palace, as she seemed to be scared of something, but just as she stepped near the ground, a bolt of magicka descended on her head from a ceiling rune and blasted it to oblivion. "Thane John, is that?" The scene was horrifying since a teenage girl was just shot by John's spell. However, when the girl's body fell on the floor, a knife slid down from her sleeve and a mask flew off her blasted head. A dragon priest mask. John saw the mask and frowned. John didn't notice it, but when he looked at the 3 assassins earlier, he noticed that they have some sort of dragon priest mask as well. Something's off. The dragon cult has a handful of masks that indicate authority as the priest becomes the ruler at a dragon's behest. If that's the case, then why are there 4 of this precious item in just one place? John had to put those ideas aside for now, as the palace was already swarming with assassins, as the surprise strategies seemed to be a failure. From a northern wing, almost 30 assassins showed up, and the same from the southern wing. And they all rushed in without making a single sound. "Defend yourselves." Falk Firebeard put up his shield and axe ahead of him before talking on an assassin, bashing him to the ground, then planting the axe into his skull. Brina Marilis, General Tullius, Thane Bryling, and Legate Rika all carried swords and shields and started fighting back to back against their enemies. John commanded the runes and sent out waves upon waves of flaming magical binds that held on to any random assassin and dragged them away from the allies fighting back to back. John himself was exposed as he needed to focus on the spell, thus he left his personal defense to 4 frost atronax that covered him from all directions. The death rate among the assassins was accelerating at an unanticipated speed, and their limbs littered the ground. General Tullius alone displayed incredible martial prowess as he cut down one assassin after another in a flurry of maneuvers. The man was a textbook for dirty and strategic fighting. Meanwhile, Legate Rika and Thane Bryling were slicing and dicing their opponents while covering the flanks behind General Tullius and leaving Falk Firebeard and Brina Marilis to take care of the rear. Something is wrong with those people. They're trying to rush us with numbers. Falk Firebeard shouted. "Focus on killing and guarding the flanks. If we become sloppy for a second, they'll break our defense." General Tullius replied. "Incoming," John shouted as he felt the new wave of enemies enter the scene. This time, it was no mindless chargers rushing in, but rather a tactical strike with magical spells. Many masked mages started teleporting in through various rifts and cast lightning binds at everyone present. This spell would cause a chain of electricity to emerge and tie the target to the mage in a very unjust game of tug-of-war. The caster can just pull the target anywhere they want, and the target can only physically resist. Falk Firebeard was caught by his feet, and Brina Marilis got her sword hand disarmed. 3 mages managed to occupy General Tullius, and the rest were struggling to keep up. As for John, half of the mages present were trying to hold him still, but somehow he corrupted their spells and caused it to blow up in their hands. "You're trying to go against me with just this?" John sneered before vaporizing the skin and flesh of these casters with acidic spells. And before the mages get to dominate the fight, John was already massacring them down one by one with his innovative magic. The moment any of them die, they would drop the masks on their faces and lie down motionless. The cleanup process is surely going to be messy as so many dead were put down, but John wasn't one to care for his enemies. The last of the mages was cornered by John and General Tullius. The general cleanly shaved off both of the man's legs by a sneak attack as John rammed the man's head into a wall, causing both the head and the dragon priest mask on it to shatter. Phew! John jolted his hand to shake off the blood and brain matter off it before looking to the people around. "Everyone alive? This is so tiring." Falk Firebeard replied. "Thane Bryling, just a flesh wound. I'll live." She replied. "Good. Let's get to—" John wanted to get the people out of here, but he was interrupted by Bryling. "Where is Lady Sybil?" she asked. John and the rest paused for a bit. "I think she went back to her office before the attack." Legate Rika replied. "I'll go check on her," John said before turning to General Tullius. "Get those people out of here." The general felt clearly offended as John felt like he was giving him an order, but that was an emergency, and the most capable one is clearly John. He just has to wait until things settle down before he can give John an earful. John immediately moved off the throne room towards the hallway leading to Sybil's room, but there, he ran into more assassins that were heading deeper inside the palace. "Hey, boys." John diverted their attention, and as they turned to him, they all unsheathed their blades with frenzied eyes. "All right, nice and easy one by one, or we can play it fair. The whole lot of you versus the whole lot of me. The first assassin ran at John. John held the man's arm, flung him against the wall, and then shattered his spine with a knee attack. The second jumped, trying to stab John in the face, but John received him, rotated around the man, and planted his head to the ground to let the brain jump out as the skull exploded. The third came at John from the back, but John kicked the man with a horse kick that threw him at the fourth and the fifth. The sixth was a large man, so John launched a palm to the man's shoulder, then a punch to his nose, then a finger stab to the chest cavity, then grabbed the man through the ribs, a knee to the abdomen, causing the garbled rib cage to deform up before launching a power punch to the heart area that caused the back of the man to deform against where he was hit from the front. Fatality. John advanced as he eliminated all those who came across him in close-quarter combat, since the hallway was tight and it was fun. As he reached Sybil's room, he acted like a gentleman and knocked on the door a few times. "Lady Sybil, this is John Dare. I am afraid we're under attack. Will you come out, please?" No response was heard from Sybil, so he knocked once again. "My lady, I hope you are in decent shape." John then proceeded to open the door, but what he saw in there made him question his sanity and close the door again. "I guess not." The sound of rummaging and fighting came from inside Sybil's room, this time clearer than before, and the voice of Sybil ran through his head. "Help me out. Oh, God." John rolled his eyes backward and opened the door again to see that two women were fighting each other with long claws and sharp fangs on a stage of blood and gore. On one hand, there was Sybil Stentor, whose clothes were all but torn, and her body seemed to have undergone some hideous transformation, as she stood completely naked with each limb extending a foot further from what they usually are, and a skin that looked all grotesque and bloody. Her eyes were scarily focused on her enemy, and her hair was messy and grisly. On the other hand, a pale hag floated by with the mask of a dragon priest covering her face, same as the assassins, but she was very light and ethereal. The problem with becoming ethereal is that if your clothes are light and you are floating, everything will be easily seen through, and John wasn't a fan of a hag's body type. Do any of you ladies know what is the opposite of having a boner? John said, and walked and tried not to look. The hag didn't seem to appreciate John's presence, but she was occupied with Sybil at the moment. He, on the other hand, was fast to notice that in this room there were 4 Draymora churls casting a barrier around Sybil, which was isolating her inside. In her vampiric form, Sybil was trying to break the barrier from inside, but the hag would use her ethereal form to pass through the barrier, attack Sybil, then escape the barrier again. The problem with being ethereal is that one can attack in that form, so they have to become corporeal to attack, then become ethereal again to escape. Sybil was able to attack the hag the moment the hag would attack her, but if she tried to focus on dispelling the barrier, the hag would take the opportunity and deliver a fatal blow. There where John had to come in. Using pride, he started to cast his spells at a rapid pace. Dispel, banish, 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 and banish. In full speed, John eliminated all the bothersome enemies that were hindering Sybil except for the hag. The moment the barrier collapsed, the hag immediately looked between John and Sybil, then decided to retreat. As she is ethereal, she could just phase through the wall and run away. But, nope, not this way, John said as he put his hand on the wall, which seemed to have imbued it with his magicka, causing it to prevent the hag from escaping. The hag tried the ceiling, the floor, the other walls, and the window, but it seemed that John turned the tables on her. So in a final attempt of escaping, the hag rushed at John, attempting to either attack him or phase through. Venus. With John's call, a third naked figure appeared in the room. However, this one was breathtakingly beautiful and divine. The embodiment of lust, Venus, would take the form which would stimulate anyone's feelings. But aside from being a strong mental influence, one of the strengths Venus has is the ability to channel John's energy even with its ethereal status. In other words, Venus can attack what is ethereal as she is ethereal herself, and the punching power she delivers is like John punching someone in an incorporeal body. It was safe to say that the hag wasn't going to survive this if not for John keeping Lust from going overboard. Just from that blow, the hag was put down unconscious with her mask shattered and her face completely disfigured. Meanwhile, Sybil Stentor kept her frenzied eyes on John, but gradually calmed down and returned to her normal form. With a flick of her fingers, she pulled the sheet of the broken bed nearby, and it fashioned itself into a dress that covered her middle-aged body. "It is called a reverse boner," she said, replying to John's first question. "Goodness, that sounds unhealthy." John shivered in fear. "Your boner's well-being aside. Hey, Solitude is under attack," she said with John refuting her first line. "The dragon cult won't back down now," John said. "They must have targeted you to keep information from reaching the Legion." Sybil immediately walked past John to the hallway as she saw the bodies which John left behind. "Are any of the leaders hurt?" she asked. "They are with Tullius," John replied. "Then we should get some men and defend the docks. The cult's army is coming from there." She revealed the cult's movement to him. "Useful scrying for the first time?" John asked. "Even I am surprised," she replied, and lifted up one of the still-living cultists before draining his blood with her fangs. John and Sybil Stentor rushed towards the entrance of the palace, and they were greeted with a sight not seen since the Dragon Wars. Dragons in the sky, fires eating the buildings, warriors on the roofs shooting arrows, and the dragon cult's fanatics are killing their way into the peaceful city. Welp, one Dragonborn coming right up. Chapter 640, Crisis in Solitude 3. I have noticed that the comment and vote rate has dropped to a new low despite the fanfiction's all-time popularity as the second most followed book. Despite the effort, I hope you guys consider more voting even though I can't push more chapters as in the past. Some motivation may be just what I need. The dragons attack Solitude for the first time and in a very organized manner compared to what John ever expected. "Didn't you say the attack would come from the dock?" John asked Sybil. "This is just the beginning. They have a small army down there," she replied. "Fuck, I'll secure the spiral stairs. The Dragonborn will be here shortly," John said, and charged into the city. The guards could hold half of the city to the area where the market was, but it seemed that the cultists had rigged the place with magical traps and explosives. John hunted a few cultists on the way, so when he reached the market square, he was anticipated by the cultists holding the line of fire over there. Thane Bryling. John met with Thane Bryling, who was leading the defense over that area. "Can you deal with that magic?" she asked. "I can, but you need to leave the men and evacuate the people to the castle," John said. "The other guards can," she said as she was eager to fight. "No, it has to be you," John insisted and turned to the guards captain. "Aldous, make sure to keep up." "Yes, Thane John." John immediately headed out of cover with a big ward being cast by his left hand that withstood all the magical attacks shot at him. With his right, he fried at the cultists with bolts of fire and lightning that devastated their lines. Behind him, the guards rushed out and cleaned up the remaining resistance. John led the rush towards the city gate until he ran into the Imperial guards holding the walls. "General Tullius," John called. "Thane John, you better tell me the Dragonborn is here," the general shouted back. "The Dragonborn comes in a minute or so." "Good. Those dragons aren't attacking anyone on the ground, but those on the walls. They snatch them easily. We need to hold on to the skirmish against the cultists down there, or else the wall may be breached. Just get your men from the nearby posts here and hold the gates," John said. Also, Sybil said that the main cult's force is landing by the dockyard. "I think it is already under their control. This is a goddamn siege. We're barely able to hold the gate." The general turned furious. "I'll hold the spiral stairs leading to the dock, and we'll try to bring some of my people to the situation here," John said. "Godspeed, Thane John," General Tullius replied. The political rivals from a minute ago are now holding the line together against a mutual enemy. John's plan may have diverged too far from its original course with the dragon cult involving itself, but this situation solves many more problems all at the same time. He was always worried about why the dragons were laying low after the last open clash with the dragon cult, but it seemed that they were focusing their attention on reigniting the war. Somehow, and despite all, it is a relief they were doing just that. Either way, John had to focus on the siege battle and make sure things wouldn't get messed up. For that, he needed his chief strategist to be present in this place. He immediately found a quiet place and took out an enchanted light tablet from his storage cube. By using some of the spells stored on it, he managed to contact Alina. Back in Winterhold's Sarthal, Alina was watching the city through the clear glass from the top of the Dare Tower as she submerged herself lazily in a hot tub. She had a wine glass in her hand and was moaning slowly and breathing heavily as she touched her bare and bountiful chest. She sensed John's signal and immediately projected it on the glass window with her staff. "Hey, babe." "John." "Hey." "Alina, what are you doing in there? It looks sexy." "Just relaxing while you were away, babe." "Oh, if the city here wasn't on fire, I would have thought this is me feeling horny." "Well, you do you, hubby. I miss you so dearly, you know. I miss you so very much, babe. It is just the situation here in solitude is sheesh. I would really use your help right now." "Okay, what's wrong with that burning house, by the way?" "Wait, is that a fight?" she asked as she looked closely at the glass. John looked away for a second, then sent Pride to kill the cultists and extinguish the fire before looking back. "Solved. Looks like you don't need my help." Alina smiled as she kept sipping her wine. "Solitude's under siege," John said. "What?" The one who said that just now was not Alina, but someone who jumped out of the bathtub with a face that was probably submerged between Alina's thighs. "Rude girl. Get back down there." Alina was immediately triggered at that girl and held her from her hair. "Oh, hey, how are you fitting in the tower, Vittoria?" John greeted the latest resident in his house, Vittoria Vici. "I am fine. Just..." Vittoria got her hair free from Alina's hands. "Just what is happening in Solitude? The Stormcloaks are attacking?" "Nope. The dragon cult is. It seems your bloody wedding attracted all sorts of weirdos." John replied. "So, how was the situation?" Alina managed to get a grip on Vittoria's nape and dragged her back next to her. The two naked and beautiful women formed an image of extreme seduction, which John resisted with a deep breath. The cult attacked with assassin and disturbed the surveillance of Sybil Stentor. After that, 3 dragons appeared, and alongside the cultists, they started terrorizing the city with chaotic attacks to diverge the attention of the defenders as their main war band enters from the dock's spiral stairs. John said, All right." Alina thought for a second. "Get the people to safety. Working on it. Don't let them all gather in one place. Use the castle, the temple, the palace, and the taverns as refugee centers. The dragons are too proud to attack separate targets of small groups for too long. If you gather all the people in one place, they will get annihilated." "Shit. Gotta hurry then." What you need to worry about is the secret phase of their plan. They made both their attack forces obvious. They should be doing something more sinister if they're acting so brazenly. In any case, no army can fully take control of Solitude before the Imperial Legion retreating through the Dragon Bridge front and destroying them. So, use a variable they didn't account for, throw a wrench in their plans, crush their illusions, and make their true intentions come to the surface. Can you hunt the cult's warband by yourself? If I attack them, they'll run everywhere and it will be tiresome. Also, the dragons would notice me. I need the Dare Corps on this one." John said, "They're a few hundred miles away. Make your own Dare Corps." Alina said, "I can't just wait. Necromancy? Inside a city during a defense battle?" John said as his voice went down. "What? You don't dare?" Alina asked with a smirk on her face. "Woman," John stopped smiling. "You're really looking forward to that analysis experience, aren't you?" "Hard pass." Alina crossed her hands. "Damn right, it's hard." John sneered, but an idea clouded his judgment. "Can I just forget about Solitude and come home? You two look so damn peachy." "Calm down, big boy," Alina replied seductively. "Don't forget what's at stake here. Blue balls? Blue Skyrim." Alina said, If the dragon cult is reigniting the civil war by weakening one side, they are surely strengthening the other side. Tis, I'll send some people to investigate the Stormcloak army. I will see if I can teleport to Solitude with a force as well. Alina said and held Vittoria from her hair, directing her down. Meanwhile, sit tight and survive the blue balls. You're being ruthless, and you love me for it. Goddamn, I do. Bye, John. Vittoria waving. Bye, Vittoria. John waving. John hung up the spell and put the tablet away. Sighing in his heart, he cracked all his joints and headed towards the spiral stairs leading down to the docks. Long night ahead. If not for the efforts of the Legion guards and the EEC agents holding up in the East Empire storehouse under Solitude, the plan of the dragon cult wouldn't have been delayed like this. The leader of the attack, Bites on Bones, the Argonian dragon cultist who venerates the great dragon Lots of Vengeance, stood in awe as he witnessed Solitude for the first time. A city standing on a lying stone. Isn't this just poetic? Long ago, he witnessed the fall of the city of Vivek when the floating meteorite shattered it to oblivion. There was also that floating city of Umbriel that terrorized the world a few decades ago. Marvels just don't end in this world, and Solitude is going to join those two marvels very soon. But they had to breach that warehouse first in order for such a dream to come true. Lord Nalat passed on the will of the great dragons to me. Tonight and before tomorrow's sun rises, the great cult shall offer Lord Alduin a city in ruin. Attack! The Argonian shouted as he watched the cult's fanatics put their hearts into ramming down the gate of the warehouse. Of course, this wasn't just the followers of the secret dragon horde. These warmonger fanatics were the followers of the war dragon horde and their dragon lord, Kungisfern. A couple of years ago, these fanatics clashed with a famous Nord warlord known as John Dare, who killed their king and annihilated their forces. They were chased off their ancestral land and forced on the top of the mountains near Ursinium. If not for the dragon that found them last year, these men wouldn't have made it back to Skyrim. The dragon cult was built on the shoulders of many former Forsworn, orcs, pirates, and many ruined clans. That's what gathered this mighty war band here under Solitude. Commander Bites on Bones. A large werewolf is attacking our men. A cultist scout came towards Bites on Bones, crying out loud. A werewolf? Where? On the side entrance to the city. The side entrance to the city, also known as the Spiral Stairs, the ones that lead up into the Market of Solitude. It is mainly used for resupply under a strict Imperial watch, but a cultist unit attacked it in order to secure entry to the city to loot and pillage the city once they are done with their main objective in the warehouse. This unit is different from the one that is keeping the guards busy at the main city gate. Take 100 men and slay that monster, the Argonian commander said angrily. The moment he finished his words, his eyes followed the trail of a man flying in the sky. The man was a brute and seemed like a very strong warrior, but something was wrong with him. Men don't usually fly, but when they do, they aren't that good at landing. That man descended in the middle of the crowd with a terrifying sound indicating that his fall wasn't peaceful. Commander, that's Ivan. The scout recognized the man who fell. All those who were pushing against the warehouse saw the man that fell and looked in his direction. He obviously fell amongst them and crushed 5 combatants under him, but as he was seen, those dead under him looked pretty much better than him. He was literally torn from guts to the bone in a horrific manner, then seemed as if it was fused together back, as if the tissues were mutating. Then, Rohair, a deep roar of a beast that felt like carrying the stench of thousands of graves. The cultists looked up and saw a werewolf that has no fur or skin, but rather an abomination of walking flesh into the shape of a werewolf. Its roar made both the living and the dead shiver, and the dead cultists and guards started to be filled with necromantic power. But what was more terrifying was the shadowy wolves that gathered around the werewolf. Though few in number, they were the thing of nightmares. The werewolf tore out a man's head with its mouth, and some of its flesh seeped into the headless corpse. They were all thinking about what kind of goddamn horror Oblivion would just decide to release on them, but no one knew that Oblivion doesn't have that much creativity with its spawns. That was John wearing gluttony, wrath using its undead authority, and Nefertiti summoning Shadow Atronax to add numbers. It was a small makeshift defense force, but was enough to buy time. Until the dragon cult is put off its momentum, John has just something in store for them all. Chapter 641, Crisis in Solitude 4. By the next day, most of Skyrim's holds got wind of what happened in Solitude last night. Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak saw his chance and prepared his men. Jarl Balgruuf the Greater knew that there was no leeway out of this coming battle. But only Jarl Idgrod Ravencrone was the one to take a wise action and send a warband of Nord youth as a relief force to Solitude. Last night was when death played its orchestra over the unfortunate city. The official story was that the dragon cult attacked Solitude, but no one wanted to believe that quite easily. Everyone and their mothers just decided to take the rumors in a different direction by their imagination powers. Some say that after the death of the former queen, the true queen of Solitude returned, the one whose sigil is the wolf that adorned the city of centuries, Queen Potima Septim. Others say that the ghost of Queen Potima was the one to make an entrance that night in Solitude in the shape of a decaying wolf person and to raise the dead in battle. Others said that the powerful ghost of the Wolf Queen appeared in the final battle and helped the defenders. Others say it is a conspiracy by some powerful wizard to trick the world and make the dragon cult fear attacking Solitude. But no one listens to those conspiracy theory people anyway. Still, what happened in Solitude yesterday was far from any rumor or conspiracy theory. It was a bloody battle of heroes and villains. The hearts beat like drums as the werewolf stood tall within dozens of arrows and spears sticking out from every direction of its body. The undead ran out a long time ago, and the shadow wolves stopped rising. The battle was tiresome, and the enemies were almost endless. All right, that's it for tonight. John was done fighting and needed some rest, so he ordered Nefertiti to create a screen of darkness around him as he retreated towards the EEC warehouse. He did so stealthily, and to enter it without opening the door, he teleported inside by sensing a space where he can fit in. The place inside is filled with the people and the guards who fortified it. They seem to have blocked the gate with a wall of crates to prevent the cultists from breaking in. They also had supplies and blankets, but had too many injured people. This made John quietly fork out some of his potions and leave them in a crate they can easily discover. He didn't reveal himself the whole time he was in there, so that he can look for whatever the cult was after quietly. After casting a dozen detection spells, John discovered nothing of value to the cult. It was just some mundane imports and exports and cheap magic items. Weird, he exclaimed. There isn't even any secret doorway or passage. The fuck they are after? He may have delayed their plans for an hour, but the cultists seemed persistent to get it. In order to prevent that, John cast a large protection rune on the warehouse gate and teleported out. There is something he doesn't know, and it is bothering him to no end. He tried to think left and right as he watched the cult's action from afar and still figured nothing out. The problem here is that he can't interrogate the cultists. The assassin ones who are wearing dragon priest masks are almost brain dead. No matter how many times he tries to torture them or interrogate them, they just seem to feel no pain. On the other hand, the warrior fanatics of the cult would rather die than utter a word to him. They can go as far as biting their own tongues if John was ever to capture them. John needed to take a breather and give this situation a thought. I don't get it. Alina said they have a hidden agenda. The dragon cult needs to kill more Nords to send their souls to Sovngarde and feed Alduin. That's how things should be. If the cult wants to kill as many Nords in Solitude as much as possible, then how do I kill as many people as possible in Solid? John had to stop thinking at this moment. It wasn't because he was interrupted, but because he had come to an idea, and quite frankly, it terrified him. This is not just going to kill everyone in Solitude. This may kill every living thing in Hafengar and the surrounding holds. Fuck, foo, 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 fuck. John could stand still no more and immediately teleported himself somewhere above solitude. Shit, this can't be happening. Please tell me it is not happening. Just don't. As there were dragons in the sky, John flew off completely undetected and headed far and deep towards the Blue Palace. He then took a nosedive down the city and off its rock to the other bank of the Karth River. Not here. Not here. He looked left and right looking for a sign, but there was nothing. He almost felt at ease as his worst fear seemed to be off point, but as he flew into the city and above the river from the thinnest point of the rock carrying Solitude, he found the thing he feared. Solitude is a city built on a high arc-like rock where the Karth River passes beneath to the Sea of Ghosts. The city always has that daring feeling to it, since it was built so high on such a risky place, which earned it its name, Solitude. A city on such a magnificent rock. But this daring idea is the thing that gave the dragon cult the sinister plan of taking down an entire city. And by taking it down, it meant literally bringing the city down. Many magic scripts covered the bottom of the rock that carried the city, and just from its appearance, John figured out it was meant to shatter the rocks. Dispel. John immediately aimed his staff and started taking down the runes. He noticed that many soul gems were installed between the rocks to give power to the spells, so he started aiming for Tish. But he felt the world around him move against his will at an incredible speed. Before he knew it, he was inside the mouth of a dragon that snuck up on him and attacked out of nowhere. Arr! The dragon pressed with its fangs against John's chest, causing him excruciating pain, but he gathered his strength in his left arm, summoned his staff, and aimed it at the dragon's snot. Highly concentrated fart explosion, a spell used by the students of the College of Winterhold to prank each other. Not in any time or space would one use it against a dragon of all the mighty beings in the world, but it was so effective that John was not only released away, but tossed as far as the dragon could swing his neck. Zortbon Mun. The dragon couldn't help but curse the human, calling him hateful. While John was released and fell towards the river mouth, he immediately activated a teleport spell and returned back again under Solitude to dispel the remainder of the spells. The dragon wasn't really willing to give up either and returned toward John, but rather than coming quietly like before, he came with a flaming breath seeking to cook the human before devouring him. The dragon closed on John at an incredible speed. The fire devoured the floating human and consumed him in no time before the dragon's maw came in and swallowed the charred man. But, Zortbon, the dragon shouted from rage as it seemed that he was fooled by another trick, where John left the fart spell inside an illusion. Fool you once, shame on me. Fool you twice, shame on you. John seemed to have been hiding all the way up and used his chance to attack the dragon from the back. But just a second ago, he left Greed and Nefertiti in charge of dealing with the soul gems and the exploding runes as he had to deal with the dragon. The dragon that John was facing was a green dragon with yellow serpentine eyes. Somehow, it felt venomous and savage. Sting Dragon. John pointed at the dragon that landed on a large boulder in the middle of the river before starting to write it down on his note. A what? The dragon wasn't sure what he heard. Well, a nasty dragon such as yourself is definitely a stink dragon. The smell give it away. John mocked. Jor. High-low stylin'. The dragon said one of the generic dragon lines, telling the mortal that he's done for. Here it comes. John put each hand on the opposite shoulder, and with a straight posture, he jumped down towards the river and took a dive in the water. The dragon which chased John in the sky descended towards the water, but seemed to be aware that John is preparing a trap. The water is not that cold, you know. However, he could still hear John's voice provoking him somehow. But even when he tried to ignore it, John found the dragon's trigger right away. Pussy. In a fit of rage, the dragon took a dive after John, and the river became quiet for a full minute before. Splash. The dragon got out of the river and tried to spread his wings to fly up, but his tail seemed stuck, and he failed to make flight before getting pulled back into the river again. 10 seconds passed before the dragon made a more violent second attempt to leave the river, but it wasn't any more successful than the one before. After that, the river started to stir and swirl violently as many echoes came from its bed and tremors started to be felt in the ground. A few moments passed this way, and many members of the dragon cult that were laying siege to the city came to check on the dragon who was fighting an enemy. After a minute, a golden bright light came from the river bed and the noises died down. As the night was cold and the river was half frozen, no one dared to investigate any deeper into the river and waited for it all to be concluded. And just like that, a man came from the river walking to its bank with his aura covering him like flames and drying all the water on him, which caused steam to rise. On the man's arms was another man who was carried like a princess, and many were familiar with him as the red-haired maniac, John Dare. "Oh, Dragonborn, I owe you yet again." The Dragonborn put John Dare, who seemed to have been in a predicament, on the ground. "No worries, Brother John. There's nothing such as debts between us," the Dragonborn replied. The two men looked at each other with sparkly and warm eyes, which caused all those seeing them to shudder in and out. Meanwhile, the two men had a different conversation as they grit their teeth. "Mirren, you bastard. Stop making me look bad," John said as he was covering his mouth by fixing his Dragonborn helm. "You teleported me in a frozen river, you bastard. You think I'll leave your fucking image be?" Mirren replied as he was disguising as John. "If Wolfer was available, he wouldn't have complained like you. You think I care? You Nords are animals in this cold. People can actually die freezing, you know? Bah, bunch of milk drinkers." John decided to quit squabbling with Mirren and passed him a sword. "I don't know why, but I can't seem to summon anyone from Winterhold here in Solitude. The dragons must have made a disturbance to isolate the two cities from linking to each other through teleportation," John said. "And I'm the only bastard who is out of town." Mirren received the sword from John. "Don't act angry. Our gay scene is always worth it. Fuck you. Deal with the cultists for me. I'll send Wrath as reinforcements," John said as he flew up to the city once again. "Giving me an army of fanatics to deal with? You're a cold-hearted bitch." Mirren cussed at John, but saw many cultists coming his way. "John Dare, today you die." An orc came towards him with a blade made of some weird materials. "Don't guys like you ever learn?" John Dare is practically the name of the Grand Champion of Cyrodiil, which makes him the strongest fighter in Tamriel by default. He's a mass murderer, you know? Mirren asked. "Die." The orc rushed Mirren with frightening momentum, but who is Mirren if not a world-class arcane trickster? Mirren deflected the blade and threw the orc off balance before aiming his finger against his opponent's forehead and flicking it with a lightning spell. "Thunder Cookie." "No." John uses his whole fist. Mirren contemplated. Whether it was a Thunder Cookie or a Thunder Flick, the orc had a hole in his head where there was supposed to be none and died on the spot, while having his brain getting fried from inside. "No." Seeing that, the Argonian who was leading the siege on the dockyard, Bites on Bones, couldn't help but feel vexed that such a strong warrior fell like nothing against the infamous John Dare. Even if they can overwhelm him with numbers, John Dare is known as one of the strongest in Tamriel. "Distract him. We need to activate the runes," the Argonian said to his second in command. "But we still haven't added the last part of the runes under the city directly," the second in command replied. "There is no time, and the only way to get there is the warehouse. This would do enough damage." The Argonian didn't take no for an answer and instructed his men. "Tell the warmongers to go for the kill, and us followers of the great secret dragon horde shall put on our masks and wait for Lord Nollet's commands." As the battle raged on this front, 3 individuals stood to watch the pillars of smoke rise from Solitude. The followers of the great cult shall execute the plan prematurely. It seems that the Dragonborn appeared too early. A man wearing a great robe and a pale dragon priest mask spoke. "Well, we have done our part of the deal and smuggled your people into Solitude in my caravan. But you promised us that your dragons will kill John Dare." Beside him, a woman spoke with all the hate and malice in the world. "Silence, woman. You and your wizard promised us that you would keep an eye on the Dragonborn. Due to that incompetence, one of the dragon lords has perished under the river. We had a deal. Tell your dragons. Disrespectful. The dragon priest shouted at the woman, and his voice carried a very strong and mysterious power, similar to that of the dragons, as he aimed his staff towards her. Maven Blackbriar and the archwizard with her, the one called Messenger, felt the immense power coming from the dragon priest. However, Messenger was his match as he held out his right hand and stopped the staff of the dragon priest. Surprisingly, it was an arm made of dwarven metal that is very durable against magic, a prosthetic arm. My friend, Nala, was it? Messenger spoke slyly. I mean, no disrespect, of course, but our deal was to keep the people of Winterhold from teleporting here. Whether the Dragonborn was in Winterhold or not is something that you people assumed on your own accord. You're questioning the ability of the secret dragon horde. The dragon priest, Nala, didn't seem to be a very open-minded character and reacted with anger. Not at all. I wouldn't have provided you with those scrolls if I didn't. Messenger said. You provided them with scrolls? Maven asked as this was news to her. What scrolls? Oh, Lady Maven, I forgot to mention. Messenger smiled. I just provided them with minor magic scrolls for combat use. Nothing but a small tip in the spirit of our alliance. That, and with the funds I provided to your cult, I expect success. Maven added. Nalulet looked between the two poisonous people, but deeper towards Messenger, who seemed as powerful as he is, if not more. The Dragonborn, John Dare, and all those who show hostility towards the great dragon cult shall witness an unforgettable night, no matter what tricks the unbelievers may use. Nalat said, just wait and see. The unholy allied trinity of Maven, Messenger, and Nalat watched the situation unfold as they held their powers for the big moment. Bringing down a city is surely some big business, but Nalat and Mycenar had two different plans in mind. The night was just beginning, and the dragons danced in the sky. Chapter 642, Crisis in Solitude 5. The Dragonborn was a serious threat to all dragons. Even without the support of John Dare, he proved to be very powerful. The moment he joined the battle on Solitude, he displayed nothing but pure martial prowess. First, he used a bow and chased off a dragon that was attacking the Bard's College. He then kept hunting the remaining cultists in the city to wipe them off completely in less than 3 minutes. Stealth Archer build, still too OP. Without hesitation, the Dragonborn moved to the front gate of Solitude and joined the skirmish from the top of the walls. The dragon cult forces seemed to have taken control of the passage to the city gate from outside and were volleying their arrows into the city, which locked the Imperial Legion's movement and made them focus on the cultists outside. Eventually, John used archery instead of directly casting magic to devastate the cultists on that front. He would print a rune on every arrow he held before letting it loose to explode and kill half a dozen cultists with every shot. The last that was seen from the dragon cult was them running back to the mountains. Even the two dragons retreated to the high peaks to the west, but their roars were still echoing in the skies. The defenders couldn't even cheer or celebrate the retreat of the cultists, as the result was clear. The losses suffered among the Legion soldiers, the guards, and the civilians were already over 2,000 dead and 5,000 more injured. The remaining soldiers who were in an able fighting condition were around 3,000, and the civilian refugees were innumerable. On top of that, the sound of the dragons roaring over the mountains meant that they're still nearby, and they are merely regrouping. Reporting, a Legion soldier came running towards General Tullius. Lord John Dare is still fighting the cultists beneath the city, sir. He is greatly outnumbered. Take 400 men and rush to his aid with Legate Rika. The general replied. No need. It was then when the main character of the scene appeared, John himself, or rather John, who was disgusted as the Dragonborn. Excuse me. The general turned to the Dragonborn with a frown. He is retreating to the city right now. The Dragonborn replied. All right. The general nodded. I must thank you greatly, Dragonborn. We are in your debt, but we're not out of the woods yet. These monsters are bound to come again. We need to reorganize. How far is the main legion? The Dragonborn asked. Less than 6 hours. Legate Rika replied. The Dare fleet will arrive in 6 hours. The Dragonborn said. The sun is already rising. This will be at the time of noon when they get here. General Tullius estimated. General Tullius. At that time, a man came in from the sky. Thane John. The general replied as he saw the levitating magician land, but he ignored the levitation part even though it was a felony. That John was of course Mirren, who disguised himself as the actual John using lust. I can't open portals to Winterhold from here, so the Dragonborn is all I could bring. John Mirren said. He is enough so far. The general replied. However, there's an urgent matter we need to discuss first. The Dragonborn said and looked at John Mirren. We discovered that the dragon cult has lined up many runes and soul gems under the rock which Solitude stands on. John Mirren continues. We believe its purpose is to cause fractures in the city's foundation, and the Dragonborn continued, but General Tullius interrupted. I'll stop you right there. The general said, Truth be told, when I was assigned to Solitude for the first time, I was fearful of a city hanging on a rock myself. I couldn't bring myself to live in such a place, but when I looked at the historical records of the Legion, Solitude was described as unshakable even against catapults and magic. The general clarified. Well, that's better than we thought. John Mirren was taken aback. The Dragonborn thought for a second before looking around, but what if the rock was fractured enough for something big to hit it? Both General Tullius and John Mirren looked at John with strange eyes. Something as big as a city? The general asked. Well, the dragons are cunning and won't take such a step without a reason. The Dragonborn said they added some under the city and some under the Blue Palace. Still, they wanted to break into the East Empire Company storehouse and plant their spells on it too. Maybe multiple dragons, no? Legate Rika said, but the three men looked at her and dismissed the idea. This is not misogyny or anything because you suggested it. I respect women in uniform and all, but that's not what a dragon would do. John Mirren replied awkwardly. Totally. Not at all. The Dragonborn joined the awkwardness. Bro, this is the scene where the woman turns out to be right and we men start looking like bigots cause we doubted her. John Mirren took the Dragonborn aside. Bro, this is you and me in the same scene. We're extra liberals. It won't go that far. The Dragonborn said. But bro, think about it. Women are always right on Netflix. John Mirren said. I know I shouldn't have let you see that. The Dragonborn said. But still, if the dragons wanted to do something themselves, their shouts would have been enough. Why resort to normal magical means? Legate Rika asked. Is it me or is this woman too smart for us? John Mirren asked. Shush, bro, enough misogyny. The Dragonborn said, then looked at Legate Rika. I think you are right. The cult is either planning this on their own, as they aren't planning to involve the dragons, or a third party is joining the fight. Legate Rika flicked her fingers. The four people present on the wall looked at each other with concerned faces. All right, Lord John should make sure to remove those exploding runes and analyze them. The Dragonborn suggested. John Mirren seemed distracted for a second before realizing that the actual John was talking to him. Yo, yes, I'll do that. Archwizard John Dare to the rescue, as always. John Mirren took his leave and left the wall flying fast into the city. All right, I will go and take a look at. As the Dragonborn was about to say something, he heard Nefertiti's voice in his head. Human, the magic is starting. Oh, shit. John couldn't maintain his cool and looked towards Mirren, who was halfway through the city before shouting, Wait! Mirren heard John and stopped immediately, but he felt the land shiver under his feet. John immediately jumped off the wall to the nearest roof and prepared a blink spell midway to reach Mirren. Rumble. Everyone in the city started to feel the shock as if an earthquake was occurring and their panic reached a new level. Meanwhile, John reached Mirren and the two of them put their power together to reinforce and cast an alteration spell on everything around them to keep it intact. Some buildings may fall. Mirren said. Hold on tight. Try to take the shock away. John shouted. Easy for you to say. Mirren held on to the spell as much as he could and tried to absorb all the tremors he could, but he failed midway and his spell broke. R, asterisk, rumble. Star, hold on. John tried the best he could as well and channeled as many tremors as he could with his staff, but the output of the explosions exceeded the input John could dish out, and he was blown away as well. From there, the chain reaction of the runes laid around the Rock of Solitude started to hasten up the process, and the real scale of the spell was shown. John may have not discovered it before, but these runes were even laid down on some parts of the city. Who the fuck cast such a spell? Mirren roared in anger. Someone powerful. An arch-wizard. John replied with his head running out of solutions for this situation. John, look. But Mirren looked somewhere where John wasn't looking. What the F? John barely turned his head, and his brain went completely blank. Not far from him was the famous Windmill of Solitude, the tower that stands as high as Castle Dower and is accessible to it through an arch bridge. Under that windmill is the spiral stairway leading to the dock. On that windmill, white fractures of arcane energy started to run through its walls all the way up. Crack crush. The fractures started to widen, and the great Windmill of Solitude staggered, lost parts of its outer wall, then lost an entire section as it was blown to smithereens, before systematically falling outside the city, down towards the docks. John felt a shadow coming from above, and, as he looked up, the bridge that was connecting the castle and the windmill was falling towards his head. Not this again. John raised his staff up as a traumatic memory came to mind, and with no restraints, he opened a portal so huge that it swallowed most of the bridge's debris and then reopened again at the middle of the sea far to the north. But most of the debris isn't all of it, since the portal he made wasn't big enough even though he moved it to swipe all the large chunks of the bridge. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. On the other hand, Mirren kept firing as many spells as possible to destroy all the remaining debris before they hit the buildings down below. Finally, the rumbling and devastating sound of the windmill crushing down the city was heard, and the screams of the people got louder as their hearts sank from terror, and a cloud of dust covered this section of the city. Mirren, John called. Yes, Mirren replied. Switch roles. You're Dragonborn. I am me again. Using the cover of the dust cloud, John held Mirren's shoulders, and the two of them switched appearances. He then clicked the ground with his staff, and all the dust was dispersed. Many debris hit the city, but not all buildings were affected, and the casualties were minimal since these buildings were emptied. But there is now no windmill over Solitude, and a collapsing section of the castle was still threatening what's under it. I didn't know they had rigged the windmill, Mirren said. Me neither. I couldn't detect it at all. John replied with an ashen face. He hurried up to where the windmill once stood and climbed the rubble to see beyond the city. Oh God, no! And that was his reaction. His words caused Mirren to hurry up to him and look down to see that most of Solitude's dockyard that was right beneath the windmill when it fell, and it became no more. The Legion soldiers, the guards, Captain Aldous, Legate Rika, Thane Bryling, and General Tullius all rallied from around the city to the collapse site, only to see that the ancient windmill is now gone, and both John Dare and the Dragonborn are standing over there looking down. The soldiers who were at the scene first cleared the road to General Tullius and Thane Bryling, who walked on top of the rubble to see. What in oblivion has happened here? Bryling asked. Look for yourselves. John pointed at the collapsed windmill and the devastated dockyard. The sun rose and shed its light on Solitude, but no one could shake off the coldness of the scenery down at the river when all turned to ruin. They destroyed the dock, and half of the river is now blocked. Legate Rika spoke in worried eyes. The Legion supplies may be solved through other ways, but the city's economy will be. She shied off saying the last word. Devastated. That's the word on everyone's mind. Solitude is a coastal stronghold rather than a city on a main traveling road. Most of the travelers come here via ship and rarely by traveling through the harsh mountain roads. They weren't planning on dropping down the city, John. The Dragonborn, Miran, said they were planning on dropping down the economy of the city. Initially, the explosive runes were meant to destroy chunks of the Rock of Solitude in order to make it impossible to pass through the river. John blamed himself for not figuring that part out when the cultists were attacking the East Empire Trading Company's storehouse. He assumed that they wanted to destroy the city's foundation, which the storehouse is under, but it seemed that his mind had wandered too far. But we can still rebuild it easily, the general said. The Fey half of the river is still intact. We can rebuild a temporary pier and put a floating bridge to this side. Legate Rika continued for him. This was true, but with the current state of things, the reconstruction effort will take at least half a month, which the Stormcloak may use to sweep off the lands before Solitude can be prepared again. Both the general and the legate seemed to be trying to cheer themselves, but a dragon's roar made their hearts sink. A shadow of a dragon passed above all of them as one of the enormous beasts took to the skies and looked down at them. Motadas Zei Jor, Zuyu Losendon, tremble before me, mortals. I am your doom. The dragon's tongue shook the skies as it took a curve in its flight and flew down towards the city at a terrifying speed. It is going to ram the city, the general shouted. It wants to block the open part of the river. With me, John held the Dragonborn, Miran, and ran on the city's edge before jumping off the wall together to intercept the dragon before it arrived. You mad? Sure. The two young men stopped midair. Miran tried to aim for the eyes of the dragon, while John prepared for a big spell. This is called a large quantity of arcane energy wrapped itself around John's staff as the dragon approached with all its momentum like an unstoppable train and Wywell Torshul, Faz Aus Ag. Roar. Crash. All sorts of loud chaos happened in an instant. Two shouts, a powerful spell, a dragon's roar, and a crash. The dragon was lying in the river and squirming as if it was possessed by something. Its fire breath shout was blocked by John's spell, and both John Dare and the Dragonborn were floating up again. The people had to run to the other side of the city to see this scene, as the dragon was just screaming rather than roaring by this point. The shout Faz Aus Ag meant pain, suffer, burn, a spell of pure malice discovered and recreated by John from an ancient record. The dragon was being occupied by the torture shout, since John knew it would be impossible to immobilize the dragon by any other means. Mortal, I'll get you for this. John wanted to hurry and slay that dragon before the shout's effect ended, but another shout echoed. Would not KSD. Another dragon appeared at a frightening speed, and before anyone could react, he lashed his tail at John and Miran, sending them off at an unimaginable speed. The dragon didn't stop there and immediately rushed towards the Rock of Solitude to wreak havoc and block the rest of the river. Shit, get the battle mages here, General Tullius shouted. Archers, battle stations. Thane Bryling led the guards. The second round was over. Now, the sun was rising to the sky and the third and final round had begun. Chapter 643, Crisis in Solitude, 6. Humanity is a mysterious thing. In many stories where a non-human is a bad guy, they're always attempting to harm humanity because they're judging them in some way while overlooking every other aspect. That is being one-dimensional and short-sighted. And so when the bad guys are at the doorstep with armies of White Walkers, ships of alien invaders, vessels of stormtroopers, or whatever branded as the face of evil in any story, humanity has a way to unite against that threat and face it together. In our case, it is the Grey Wolf movement that supports Thane Bryling and the Imperial Legion, which supports Thane Brina Marilis. Facing a single defined enemy they saw as a threat, the archers and the wizards of both sides went out with all their power to kill or be killed. Of course, they would prefer aiming these weapons and spells at one another when the invading dragons go away, and that's what humanity is. They look for what is different among them and show resentment to it until they get rid of it. Then they look deeper and discriminate among themselves again. Man or elf, Nord or Imperial, white or black, old holds or new holds. They're just so good at finding differences to squabble about. But they would surprise you when they unite. The defenders beating the dragons that try to scorch their city with fire. Who would have imagined that? And when the cries of the savage dragon cultists were heard outside the gates as they charged in, when a third dragon broke it open, the people of Solitude swarmed from every nook and cranny, holding everything from swords and spears to brooms and candlesticks. Even the women and children threw rocks and boiled cooking oil from above the buildings at the vile madmen. 3 dragons took to the sky, and the city was fighting without breaking. No Dragonborn or John Dare was protecting them. They were doing fine on their own. But the heroes of this event can't be off stage for too long. Previously, John and Mirren, who were disguised as the Dragonborn, were attacked by a rushing dragon and got hit by his tail to instantly fly like tennis balls. Mid their flight, John managed to get hold of Mirren, and right before they hit the ground, John opened a portal and evaded the crash. The portal opened in the sky way above Solitude, where the dragons weren't focusing. John and Mirren saw the situation and nodded to each other. Their clothes flattered as they controlled their fall with their magic and headed down with their weapons in hand. Down there, a dragon arched back his neck as he stopped mid-flight, and its mouth was radiating with raging flames that were ready to consume the Nord defenders who were cornered in the market. The Dragonborn, Mirren, was the first to arrive, and with his sword, he penetrated the wings of the dragon and used the force of his fall to cut open the wing vertically. The dragon roared with his flames up to the sky as the pain was torturous to him. Yet in the reflection of his eyes was the knee of John Dare, who attacked the dragon's face with the force of his fall as well. The dragon breath, which was aimed up to the sky, was directed by John's action to the members of the dragon cult who rushed through the open city gate from the main avenue. Overkill! John shouted with joy, but the next moment, the dragon that just broke the gate rushed towards his fallen comrade, Dragon, with a powerful gust of wind, and held him from his shoulders before carrying him up and tossing him off the city into the river away from the Dragonborn. Cunning bastard! John cursed. John held a large piece of debris and used his chaos tattoos to generate enough physical power, then launched it at the flying dragon to hit him on the head and cause him to retreat in panic. Seeing how the eyes and hair of John Dare went black, Mirren immediately ran away and put enough distance between him and John. The latter put his immense strength into his hips and jumped to the sky towards the next dragon, causing a strong shockwave at their clash. Dragonborn were being overwhelmed by the dragon cult. Thane Breiling ran into the Dragonborn, Mirren, and sought out his advice. "I don't know. I'll distract the dragons, or whatever," he replied, not knowing what to do, but he immediately put his hand on the helm. "John, we need more manpower down here." "You're fine with undead and Deidre?" John asked Mirren. "You're fine with undead and Deidre?" Mirren asked Breiling. "Of course not, but we can't be picky at the moment," she replied. She said yes. Mirren said, "Wrath and Zykel are on their way." John replied, "He said he's sending his special undead and Deidre." Mirren said, "When? Oh, hey. A terrible scream was heard as the Bone Colossus Samurai made its entrance and rushed at the cult. "That's the undead," Mirren said. "Thud, mortal, you know I hate fighting dragons." And a demonic hoarse loud voice echoed in the sky. "And that's the Deidre," Mirren said. Zykel the Daedric Titan appeared with many chains, cuffs, and collars covering his body. The last John has heard from him was that he was captured by his Draymor's sister and was being kept a prisoner to her sadistic torture. As Zykel received orders from John, he headed down towards the Dragonborn, Mirren. He said to assist you by distracting the dragons from the people. Zykel said, "Good, that will help a lot." Breiling's face brightened up even with the presence of the terrifying Daedric monster. "Nah, it will hurt a lot," Mirren said. "What about the reinforcements? They should be seeing the dragons flying over the city now. What about your reinforcements?" she asked. Mirren reported to John and asked about the reinforcements of Winterhold. He said they started moving and will arrive in a couple of hours. Mirren replied, "From winter hold to solitude? That's a couple of weeks, not hours." Browling exclaimed, "We have our methods." Mirren said before turning to Zykel, "It's time we go." Mirren held on to the chain coming down from Zykel's neck, and the Daedric Titan started flying between the dragons to divert their attention away. The army of the cult was rushing without fear as they had dragons on their side. The defenders fought like cornered rats and spared no effort to kill their enemies. The dragons relentlessly tried to shake off John, Mirren, Zykel, and the battle mages on the ground. All were just killing each other harmoniously. Death was looming under this beautiful morning sky, and blood painted the streets of Solitude red. Watching that sight from a far enough distance were Maven Blackbriar, Archwizard Messenger, and Dragon Priest Nalat. "Here he is." Maven spoke. "I see him." Messenger nodded. "And I see the Dragonborn." Nalat said, "Gentlemen, I think you all know what to do." Maven turned to the two robed men beside her and backed down. "Let's get this job done, shall we?" Messenger said and raised his prosthetic arm, aiming towards John. His arm transformed into a cannon-like object and took aim towards John. Meanwhile, Dragon Priest Nalat was communicating via his Dragon Priest mask and looking. Back in his solitude, one of the cultists who were wearing masks stopped the raiding and fighting as his Dragon Priest mask started to glow. He then transformed into Dragon Priest Nalat. "I'll kill you, Dragonborn." Back to where Maven and Messenger were. Seeing the body of Nalat burn and dissolve made them feel disgusted, but it wasn't the first time they saw such a thing. "Can you make it from here?" Maven asked. "I can," Messenger replied as his magic kept overcharging to an incredible level. It took him a minute, and he sacrificed many soul gems to reach the desired input before he transformed it into an output. John Dare was hanging from the horn of a flying dragon and digging his sword into the dragon's eyes as he was trying to electrify the dragon's brain from inside. It was an agonizing process, but just as he felt that it was about to succeed, the hairs of his body were all erected. It is the same feeling one gets when they are about to be hit by lightning. John could only let go of the dragon and ward himself with an incomplete spell as the attack came. The sky darkened as the blinding bolt of Magicka reached its target without even the single probability of missing. "John! Thane John! Protect him!" Mirren, Bryling, and Tullius all moved towards John immediately, but Mirren's way was blocked by the sudden appearance of the Dragon Priest. The Legion's mages were occupied with the dragon, and the guards were pushing back the remaining cultists. And John fell from the sky without a hint of consciousness. Zykel and Mirren tried to get as near to him as possible, but the Dragon Priest was haunting the Dragonborn, Mirren, like the plague. John crashed down on one of Solitude's most important buildings through the roof and disappeared inside. The Temple of the Divines. Right to the funeral, Messenger, who stood a few miles out of Solitude, spoke with a wide grin. He's dead?" Maven asked with a pale face full of disbelieving expressions. "Nope." Messenger shook his head, "but he will. Injuries like that are impossible to recover from." Messenger opened a part of his prosthetic arm and let out a large cartridge-like object to throw away and replace. "So, when will he die?" Maven asked. "When the big monster that he conjured disappears, he will be confirmed dead," Messenger replied, pointing towards Zykel. The situation was far from over in Solitude, and with the fall of John Dare, the defense became more of a hectic battle rather than just a city defense. Casualties were rising by the hundreds. Amidst all this, John Dare was in an area of town where the fight hasn't reached yet. There were a lot of people in the building he fell in, and they were all powerless citizens and refugees. The body of John Dare was lying on the ground between all the shrines of the divines with some of his limbs facing the wrong directions. But that wasn't even the most fatal part. John had the entirety of his chest blown off by the magic he was hit with. His flesh was torn and his ribcage was exposed. Beneath it were quivering lungs, a beating heart, and a lot of tissues and wounds open and bare. John himself was barely conscious but completely unresponsive. Those who screamed only did so when he fell from the roof. When he was displayed in that manner, none could even breathe or even move their eyes away, as his appearance was the stuff of horror. But what seemed unhealable or unfixable was never to stay this way. Not in John's book. His ring glowed, and a monster-like pile of flesh appeared. This caused the people to finally panic and back off to the front of the temple. The high priest of the divines kept holding his restoration staff with shaking hands, but had no idea of what to do. The monster-like pile of flesh, or rather gluttony, started to spread itself over John's fatal injuries. Bit by bit, strength seeped back into the devastated body of John Dare. His limbs started correcting themselves, his chest was raised again, his backbone was fixed, his neck cracked, and his penis went into a full erection. Why does this keep happening? John sat up from his fall and couldn't help but be embarrassed as he cast a minor illusion to hide his boner. Don't tell my wife, okay? Lord John, High Priest, what about magic was that? My boner, wah. It's embarrassing when a grown-ass guy gets a boner in public, so excuse me. John wanted to hurry up and leave, but his steps halted and he looked around. Instead of going out of the temple back to the fight, he decided to go the other way deeper into the temple. Where are you going? The high priest chased after John asking so. Give me a sec. John held his hand up before aiming his index and middle fingers at the right temple of his head. Mirren, I'm fine. No, don't do that. Just keep them busy. I need 10 minutes. Yes, it's urgent. I'll send Nefertiti over with some scrolls. And watch out for that sniper. He can kill you in one shot. Keep on moving around fast. Use Zykel as a meat shield. John finished his telepathy with Mirren and looked at the high priest. All right, where were we at? John asked. I don't know. The high priest stuttered, but John remembered what he wanted. Right? Give me your keys. John said. What? You mad? The high priest refuted immediately. Just give me the damn keys. John carried the high priest upside down and shook him well, allowing a keychain to slip along with a few bottles of wine and rum that seemed pretty fresh from the market. Help! You're assaulting a man of the gods. The high priest screamed, and the crowd around him looked at him silently. A man of the gods? John sighed. Of all the words I know, this set of words still doesn't feel right with me. Keys. Here they are. Ciao. John let go of the high priest, picked up the keys, and went further into the temple. What are you doing, you madam? The high priest screamed. The cult has let some Draugr through an old catacomb under the temple. They can break in here, so I'll deal with them. No need to thank me. John's voice came from the basement as he stormed the place without care. His head was busy. He was attacked from a few miles away by a buffed-up magic missile. The level is that of an archwizard for sure, and the archwizard he ran into the past few days was that Messenger guy. Of course, it could be any other unknown archwizard, such as a dragon priest or something, but even the dragons can't produce a dragon priest this fast. Maven, you keep forcing me to hasten up my plan and to think you would try to attack me during a fight with a dragon. You become too annoying to keep alive. John held the keychain and tried to open the temple's basement before figuring out that there are more than 20 keys in the keychain. Fuck, crush ding. He simply punched the gate open and threw the keychain away before arriving at the storage room of the temple. Just by using the simplest detection spell, he found a wall that was sealing a passage behind it and punched it down. O El Potima, here I come. Chapter 644, Envy. Double chapters for my lovely readers. The living shall always fear the dead. Potima knew the meaning of those words, and through her desire for power, she understood the way humanity works too early in her early life as the imperial princess of the Cyrodiilic Empire. Excellence. That's a word that barely gave her justice. She was just supreme. A wild talent. A storm. An empress-to-be. Sadly, she was reduced to a queen in the far northern barren solitude. If that wasn't a plain exile, then they wouldn't have sent her to a place with such a name. Well, she was evil. A a tiny flaw in her personality that will only cause the bloodiest civil war in the history of the Empire and scar it for generations to come. But as said, she knew how humanity works. She knew how to control them and bring them to their knees. Her method, as she described, it was the duality of hope and fear. Sadly, there is no single term to sum hope and fear together, since the language sees them as completely separate things. But in Potima's book, that was called Power. Argue as you may, but hope and fear are two sides of the same coin that is held above all people by those who have power. Argue that hope is good and fear is evil, but then think about this. False hope and rational fear, what are they? Potima had those answers figured out before she reached 10, so it isn't of her concern if others would share opinions with her. By 14, she was already the Queen of Solitude and wife to the elderly King Mantiarco, who gave the back then Kingdom of Solitude to her total control. She was already a powerful magic caster, which hindered her ability to produce an heir until the age of 30. Her grandfather, Emperor Uriel Septim II, was dead by that time, so she named her son after him and had high ambitions that her offspring would one day sit on the ruby throne. As her father, Pelagius II, was the emperor by then, he faced opposition to his rule and was assassinated by the Elder Council to open the door for Potima's elder brother, Antiochus, to be the emperor. History remembers Antiochus as the most scandalous emperor, and the history books are nearly pornographic in their depictions of life at the imperial court during the years of his reign. Potima, whose passion was for power, not fornication, was beyond rage every time she visited the imperial city. After 13 years, Potima would raise her son Uriel to rise in the stead of his dead father, and whispered to his ears her ambitions of the ruby throne. On the other hand, the emperor and the empress were so engrossed in fornication that the only recognized heir to the imperial throne was Princess Kintura, whose lineage was doubted as the child of the empress and the captain of the imperial guards at best, if not the boy who cleans the cistern, according to Potima herself in her iconic speech in front of the Elder Council. She, of course, killed her brother before that speech and systematically assassinated all those who dared to call themselves of his blood. If any, Potima was an extreme fanatic of the purity of the dragon blood, as she tried to prove that hers is the last true dragon blood, which leaves her son as the most suitable heir to the ruby throne. Of course, this wasn't completely true, since she had two younger brothers, Sepphoris and Magnus Septim, who were more suitable than her son Uriel, but had less support overall. Despite her efforts, however, Kintura Septim II was declared empress. It was then when the civil war broke out, the infamous War of the Red Diamond. Potima and her son Uriel lured Empress Kintura II out of Cyrodiil into High Rock as the Empress Breton allies betrayed her and locked her in a castle while her armies were slain east and west. Empress Kintura died at some point, and the imperial city was finally opened to Potima and her son Uriel, who became Emperor Uriel Septim III. As for Kintura, her death was most tragic, but she had no grave, so no one rallies under her name ever again. However, the date is confirmed to be the Day of Broken Diamonds. As for Potima, she enjoyed the position of the Empress Mother. Despite that, the War of the Red Diamond never came to an end, as the most unlikely participants were the ones to persist, Sepphoris and Magnus Septim, who were supporting Empress Kintura II. For years, the War of the Red Diamond kept going until Potima was 61 years of age, but she still led the army of the Empire herself and chased the rebels across Tamriel. At that time, Sepphoris Septim had an army in Hammerfell, and Magnus Septim had an army in Skyrim. Potima returned to Skyrim and fought Magnus Septim until she cornered him, but during the battle that her son Emperor Uriel Septim III, who was supposed to be fighting the army of Sepphoris Septim in Hammerfell, was defeated and captured by the enemy. Potima descended into rage and led the final assault against Magnus Septim and defeated him in order to return to Cyrodiil. But what she received was the news that the emperor was killed by the angry citizens of the imperial city as they lit the carriage that transported him ablaze on the way to his trial. It was at this moment when Potima couldn't contain her madness and started employing all the dark arts she knew in order to root out the new Emperor Sephirus Septim, whose declaration as the Emperor enraged Potima to no end. She summoned Daedra to fight for her, had her necromancers resurrect her fallen enemies as undead warriors, and mounted attack after attack on the forces of Emperor Sephirus I. Her allies began leaving her as her madness grew, and her only companions were the zombies and skeletons she had amassed over the years. The Kingdom of Solitude became a land of death. Stories of the ancient wolf queen being waited on by rotting skeletal chambermaids and holding war plans with vampiric generals terrified her subjects. At the age of 90, Solitude was besieged, and Potima proved impossible to kill since she became something that was no longer a human by that time. To end her, the battle mages of the Empire weakened her enough to be able to put a seal on her body and separate it from her soul before sealing the body under the depth of solitude and the soul in the coldness of the mountains. While she lived, she had been the granddaughter of Emperor Uriel Septim II, daughter of Emperor Pelagius Septim II, and of the Empress Kintura Septim II, mother of Emperor Uriel III, and sister of the Emperor Antiochus and Emperor Sephirus. After her death, the new emperor was Magnus Septim, and his son became Pelagius the Mad, also an emperor. In other words, every member of her goddamn family has an emperor from her forefathers to her brothers, son, and even her niece, but Potima herself died a provincial queen. How would that make you feel? Potima, screech, sigh. Those undead just don't have any form of pleasantries. You break into their catacombs, and they just come running at you without acting surprised. If I ever walk up from a slumber in such a cold day, this energetic, I'd have conquered the world by now. Those septims are just built different, man. While I was in my hasty exploration in the catacombs of Queen Potima under Solitude, I had to go through the biography of the Wolf Queen by Cater Araphanes one last time to see how the ancient queen reacts. It wasn't a good reaction, I say. To sum it up, the moment I stepped into these catacombs, the ghost of Wolf Queen Potima was already whispering all sorts of nonsense into my ears. Something like, "You've arrived at last. The hero who prevented me from being bound returns to my fold. And I have much to thank you for, little one. When you die, I will raise you, and you can take your place by my side. You'll serve me soon enough. Oh, and not much further. Come, little thing, serve me in death. Oh, bitch, I'm married. Have some decency." That was my final reaction before taking out the biography book and starting trash-talking Potima with its content. It's safe to say that she didn't appreciate it, especially that last part about everyone in her family being an emperor or an empress of some sort except for her. She's not liking it all, goddamn. Those undead really bite bad. While I can at least see the ghost of the old bitch in the final boss room. You've come far, insolent mortal, but can you stand against my inner counsel? Let's see. Oh, this oval room had a lot of Draugr, the type that makes you feel bad for taking down since they could be considered historical discoveries, but those walking historical discoveries are greatly unappreciated in this world. This legion of undead was probably Potima's council and the necromancers who led her army of Daedra and undead. The ghost of the wolf, Queen herself, was floating in the middle of this chamber, gathering power for her resurrection. Still, she offered this power quite generously to the nearest Draugr council member in order to raise them. I appreciate the welcoming. I couldn't help but try my best to sound humble and upright. Kill him. Yet she was this rude. All right, I came here with a proposition, Queen Potima, I said as I bashed the head of that Draugr with the biography book. If you surrender to me, I'll make sure your remains aren't sacrificed to Arche. Yet she raised another Draugr. How rude. I guess the term sour bitch includes crazy she-wolves too. I had to bash the head of the other undead while taking a closer look at the ghost. The ego of Queen Potima was indeed active and displayed a very masterful manipulation of magicka and soul. She was reforming her astral body once again from bone to skin. I remember trying to reform an astral body a few times. The process was maddening. The best I could do was to copy an organ from another organ at that moment when Alina and I healed Jolner's eye. Truly admirable. I really wanted to watch and learn, but pride, keep those sons of bitches from biting me, please. Now to focus on what we have in hand. A dangerous necromancer with a political agenda and a claim to the Ruby Throne trying to resurrect herself, while there are dragons and a dragon cult attacking Solitude up there. All right, modern problems require modern solutions. I cracked my knuckles, my neck, and my back to be ready for this one. I needed power and concentration in order to complete the ritual of resurrecting the Wolf Queen successfully. And here it comes. John floated with his astral self into the influx of energy surrounding the ghost of the Wolf Queen. This battle required all of John's fragments to be on standby. Pride managed to get rid of all undead in the catacombs by blasting through them while flying around before returning to be on standby beside John and channel its energy to the main body. Greed and Nefertiti were already on standby beside the Blue Palace. Greed surrounded Nefertiti and her body as the two of them synced with John and channeled their energy. Wrath was in the middle of a fight in the city, and despite being a big pile of undead bones, it was famously known as the undead familiar used by John Dare, so no one complained about it. Still, the Bone Colossus stopped mid-fight, aimed its blade down, and went on standby as well. Lust was possessing Mirren by that time, and making him look like the Dragonborn. Lust's final form, Venus, separated itself from Mirren, who returned to his usual form while he was riding Zykel. He was being chased in the sky by the angry dragon priest when that happened, and the dragon priest couldn't fathom what was going on. Finally, Gluttony was greatly damaged when it used parts of itself to replace John's damaged organs, and so John put it on slumber since Gluttony is an insurance policy. In the energy influx, Queen Potima felt that her spell was being invaded by a skilled wizard, and no matter who she tried to shake off the control of the other wizard, he was overpowering her with multiple egos at once. As their astral forms collided, Potima's form that was corrupted by dark Daedric energy met John's golden draconic soul. Bit by bit, John's power devastated all the Daedric seals, which kept Potima's soul active for those many years by letting his energy flow through her. What? What are you doing? Know your place. I'm not yours to control. Surrounded by such a huge amount of magicka, the ghost of Queen Potima was akin to a person standing in the eye of the storm. She lost control of all this energy to John, and her Daedric essence was dispelled, meaning that her astral body can't longer exist in the mortal realm without a mortal body. You think I will submit? Potima asked with clear vexation, as she had no way to control anything in this tornado of magicka, and so John attacked her astral body with his palm, sending a large load of his energy in her. That felt wrong for some reason, but he still did it. The ghost of Queen Potima was blasted outside the magicka stream, and John's astral body returned to his physical body. Potima managed to control some magicka and put a necromantic seal on herself, so her soul didn't just pass to the afterlife, but as she did, she noticed that there was a seal that had been established by John's own soul power. That it is unfathomable if a human used their soul directly for any magical purpose, since it can greatly affect their lifespan, but that was way too absurd still. Catch her. It was then that John laid his trap, as the seal inside her resonated with his soul power. From the depth of his soul, 4 astral fire WRMS rushed out and caught Potima's astral body by biting her 4 limbs and disabling her from using any magic. No, worthless mortal worm, who do you think you are? I won't be trapped like this forever. Once my minions get their hands on you, they will peel the skin of your face. John walked into the last sealing chamber where the ghost of the queen was held by his fire WRMS, and he watched as she was lifted up to the ceiling while cursing and raging at him. "You're so untamable, aren't you?" John said as he looked up to her, then down to the ancient throne she had. "That's your seat of power." John walked up to the old stone throne and found a skull lying on top of it. The skull had a beautiful crown-like ornament with a blue clear gem fixed on its front. "Oomph." John laughed before coating his hands with arcane energy and carefully holding up the skull. "This is what binds here. Your skull and a soul gem on top of it. Smart." He held the skull from its sides and linked his energy with the soul gem. Watching how he moved the head around, the head of the ghost moved exactly as he moved the skull. It also stopped cursing at him and watched him with fear and worry. "If the legend is true, your father and mother killed a demonic werewolf and trapped its soul in a soul gem and made it into an ornament. After that, you were born, and your grandfather was recorded to have said that you have the eyes of a she-wolf ready to jump her prey. Ah, don't mind me, I'm just rambling. Who are you?" It was then when Potima showed actual curiosity regarding him. "John Dare, a big fan," he replied. "You wish to see power, John Dare? You covet it? You want to reach beyond what a mortal man can?" asked the ghost of the Wolf Queen. "Ain't we all?" John replied. "But you, in particular, are more ambitious than even me in my prime. I can see it, I can feel it. You seek power to the point that your body is more magic than flesh. Truly remarkable." "Oh, that's so. Yes. And the talent. Yours is beyond any mortal I've seen." "Oh, thank you. It took me quite a while to cultivate it. But with your talent, I can turn you into the greatest mage that ever lived. I can. Divaith Fyr is the greatest mage that ever lived. He's my great-grandmaster." "Oh, do you have any offers left before we proceed?" John laughed as Potima's offers were already nothing compared to what he has. "I hid many artifacts. Pass. The Imperial Throne. Hard pass. Damn mortal. You think you can play me as you want. I'll feast on your soul." "Oh, I applaud your patience." John sat on Potima's throne amidst her undying rage and held up her skull. "And your teeth, too. Those pearls look very fine after hundreds of years. Damn, you're a psychopath for sure." John had his fun, and it was time to go serious. He took out a small silver knife and aimed it at the skull. Potima was greatly in discomfort, but she wasn't one to beg for her life. John started muttering words one after another and carefully carved a few runes on the sides of the skull. They were not composed of usual magical script or Daedric. They were Drovazol dragon runes. John uttered the letters and the words as he completed a few lines to lay the foundation to his curse. "What are you doing?" Potima asked. "Do you know what a lich is?" John replied, and Potima didn't ask anymore. "Well, it is not exactly a lich either." John continued to amuse himself while working. He then took out his personal mask, Krylin, and positioned it above the skull. With his fingers, he heated up the mask until the enchantment on it broke from the heat and the ebony mask started to redden. It was then that John put the mask on the skull and let them fuse together. "Pride, assemble one." John ordered his staff, and it started to roam through the catacombs, gathering bones and body parts from the Draugr. Knowing the picky nature of Pride, it would only bring the best parts. The spell used was a normal assembly spell for an undead creature, but the carefully picked parts were refined and remade by Pride, as if every bone were printed by a master sculptor. "Your staff is possessed," the Wolf Queen said. "My pride and joy," John replied, which caused Pride to fly around and act haughtily. "What game are you playing?" "The power game." John stood on the throne and reached the assembled undead lying on the ground. Per John's instructions, it was headless and had a hole in its chest. John installed a strange device in the hole and fixed it well before taking out a grim-looking object from the cube. A heartstone. Back in Solstheim, I met that 200 years old Imperial who achieved some sort of pseudo-life by transplanting a stone like this in place of his heart. I picked the best one I could find, filled with power from the Heart of Lorcan. The Heart of Lorcan? Wolf Queen, as I said, I'm a big fan. I only brought you the best of the best. John then put the skull on top of the headless skeleton and made sure it fused. He then moved his hand over the skeleton, and an ancient Nord robe with a wolf head mantle covered the skeleton. It covered the shoulders area, then the middle of the chest area, while moving down to the torso and ending just a little bit below with segmented steel. To an educated eye, this is a dragon priest attire. Please. John ordered the 4-fire WYRMS to bring down the astral body of the Wolf Queen and position it on top of the skeleton. The Queen made her dissatisfaction clear with a ton of curses and insults. Her features were still incomplete as she didn't finish reconstructing her astral body fully, but if John was to guess her appearance, it would be a CSE-like face from how twisted it got with anger. You think you can control me or turn me into a lich? Divaith FYR taught you nothing? Dream on, you moronic idiot. Dream on. At least do some research if you were this excellent of a wizard. I am of the dragon blood. You think that a soul like mine will submit to the spell of a low-life mortal? Just you wait for me to get out of this and rip your throat out. Potima spared no insult and displayed her anger as John passively looked at her. He made sure her astral body was right on top of the body he created, and then he went down on one knee and called out 3 items that made Potima go silent in a second. On his hand appeared the gauntlet Wraithguard, on Wraithguard appeared the Hammer Sunder, and on his other hand appeared the Dagger Keening, the 3 legendary tools of Kagranak. Told you, best of the best, just for you. John smiled and smote down the fire WYRM over the right arm. Life fades with hate. Then the left arm. Gold dims with monopoly. Then the right leg. Joy dies with misery. Then the left leg. Beauty rots with jealousy. When John smote every fire WYRM, which are the product of his soul power as a Dragonborn, the fire WRMS fused themselves into the artificial body while maintaining control over the ghost of Queen Potima while shining brightly in a pattern. Each time, the ghost would wither in pain, but Potima was prideful and didn't break even with her 4 astral limbs sealed in the body. John replaced Sunder with Keening, then with the side of its blade. He pushed Potima's ghost down into the body and kept it there. Only her head remained out of the body in a final act of defiance. There is no point resisting. John said, "You will never break the Dragoness." Potima didn't even consider his advice. "I see you are obsessed with the dragon blood, as every fool of you septims." John said, "The only dragons that were septim were old Tiber septim and young Martin septim. You didn't even possess the true Devassos, dragon blood. How dare you are GK? Oh." John's tyrant aura defied logic and clutched over the face of the ghost. Without even the help of the dagger keening, John pressed Potima's head into the skull and made a cut on his hand. Slowly, John gathered a bit of blood on his palm, and the blood crystallized with his magic. In a few seconds, the blood turned into a small bead of bright blood and hovered above John's hand as slowly John brought it above the heartstone. The blood and the heartstone touched, and as if they're made of the same thing all along, the blood disappeared in it. BADUM. BADUM. BABADUBADUM. The astral body of the Wolf Queen and the undead body created by John fused together marvelously. Dust and dead ashes started to flow from everywhere in the catacomb to complete the body of Potima. John then chanted the ritual for his spell. The more he chants and the more words he utters, red cracks would grow from the heartstone, carrying John's blood to every part of that body. The body started to shake as pain and screams were the first things ever known by it. Life fades with hate. Gold dims with monopoly. Joy dies with misery. Beauty rots with jealousy. For all succumb to envy, and envy walks away empty-handed, despised, and empty. By you, I free myself from envy. The dust and the ash started to come together and reforge a body on the skeleton of Potima, just exactly like how it did with the ash spawns of Solstheim. The only difference is that this body was extremely refined, fitting the specs of Potima's astral body. As the ash and the dust settled, a motionless body was left on the ground with a face made of engraved ebony and ash and dust for its flesh. The red cracks faded away, and only the heartstone glowed faintly along with the 4 golden fire WYRMS imprinted on the arm. The body showed no signs of moving, and remained like that for a few seconds before its opening with a burst of crimson aura. John merely raised 2 fingers up, and the body floated as he commanded with its legs, arms, and head dangling loose. As the body was fixed midair, consciousness kicked in and all the red cracks glowed, once before fading again. John let loose of the body, and it descended to stand on its feet with perfect balance. The power of the blood of John Dare ran through every crack of that body, acting as energy channels, and the heartstone acted as a core. The stone remained glowing as all the cracks faded and the body looked up. The body is that of an undead, but it was conscious and had a very unique and strong ego. It clenched its fist and remembered the long, distant feeling of a physical body. But most importantly, it felt a power that was extremely familiar, yet far superior to whatever it was like before. Dragon power, dragon blood, pure dragon soul and blood. Potima recognized it all and subconsciously put her fist above the heartstone and looked meaningfully at John before greeting him. Your Imperial Majesty. Envy, Dragonborn Priestess. Death Queen, Dread of Solitude. Wolf Queen Potima, Ego. Chapter 645, Turning the Tide. Your Imperial Majesty. There was no mistaking John for what he truly is, a Dragonborn. A mortal with the blood and soul of a dragon. For anyone else, it is impressive to be a Dragonborn. For Septim, it is a whole different story. The Septims were the ones that carried the legacy of the Dragonborn emperors for many long years, as their ancestor was the Dragonborn conqueror, Tiber Septim. But long before Tiber Septim of the 3rd Dragonborn dynasty, there were Reman Cyrodiil of the 2nd dynasty and Saint Alessia of the 1st dynasty. Each of these 3 individuals created an empire that stood to last hundreds of years. If that man who just passed his blood to her is a Dragonborn, there is no mistake he is the Emperor of Tamriel. Despite all that, Potima didn't bend the knee or lower her head. She wasn't even willing to act inferior despite knowing that she was under his control. Whatever. John looked at her and snorted before turning away. You chose to bind me for a reason, young Emperor. May I know why? Potima didn't seem to have been satisfied with his reaction, on the other hand, and demanded an explanation. Solitude is in danger, and I need an army of undead. I can do it myself, but I also have the best necromancer in the world sleeping under this city. John said, and kept walking. Solitude, Potima replied. My city. John could feel that Potima was a little bit emotional as she started to follow him step by step. Amazing, John exclaimed. What? Potima replied. Your ego is so clear. I never imagined it would be possible, but of all my sin artifacts, you are the only one that was perfected upon creation. A sin artifact? Is that what I am? Offended, I thought I would become some sort of undying minion or a lich. I feel like a lich, and I should feel angry by it, but I don't. Well, you're a part of me now. An extension of my power with the ego of Wolf Queen Potima. That title, that offends me. Oh, excuse my rudeness, your ancient majesty. You're the emperor of this generation. I wouldn't act out of place with you. Well, I ain't no emperor, John said. Really? The first prince then? Heir to the ruby throne? But you wouldn't awaken the dragon blood within you unless you've lit the dragon fires at the Temple of the One. Potima found it strange. God, you're ancient. John sighed. A lot has changed. The two took the back door from the catacombs to get out, and in 1 minute, John found the door leading out to the mountain behind Solitude. First, there are no dragon blood emperors remaining in this world. John opened the door and let the sunlight brighten the way out. Second, the Septim dynasty has fallen 200 years ago. It was a glorious fall, but a fall nonetheless. John took Potima out to the world, and from where they stood, they could see the entirety of Solitude and the battle taking place. Third, the dragons are back to the world, and it is my duty to prevent Alduin from ending the world as we know it. Kinda lackluster, but I am having fun nonetheless. Any questions? John's introduction of the world for resurrected people from the past is a terrible idea for a book. John himself is the worst tour guide to have, and Potima was lost for words. First order to envy. John cleared. Raise the dead cultists, kill the living ones, cooperate with Solitude's defense, then join me when it is over. Kinda ironic, right? 500 years ago, you were defending this city. 500 years later, we're doing the exact same thing. 500 years. And before I forget, Strumbach rumble. John shouted the storm call shout in order to ward off the rays of sunlight, and so the undead don't get damaged. Seeing the sky darken and the clouds thicken, Potima recognized the Thursday and felt amazed by its power. The art of the voice was something she is very familiar with and capable of practicing, but the situation was accelerating way too fast for her 500 years dulled senses. Wait, I need to know more. She wanted to say something, but John turned away. Later, he opened his hand, pride appeared, closed his hands, and teleported back to Solitude. Meanwhile, Envy was left on her own, trying to ignite the power inside the new body she was given. With some attempts, she managed to cast a bound sword spell and conjured a Daedric flying creature. Let an ancient evil queen join the defense battle. John didn't see anything wrong with that at all. The sky darkened as lightning started flashing before it randomly picked a cultist every few seconds. The forces of the dragon cult managed to push deep into the city, reaching as far as Castle Dower and dropping many dead on the way. John descended first from the mountain, and the scene caused his face to stiffen. All he wanted was to prevent death and stop the war. He trained so hard for that. He rebuilt Winterhold for that. He trained a private army for that. He dominated the economy for that. He even played dirty and killed innocents for that. Each soul dies and goes to Sovngarde feeds Alduin, and tonight he is feasting on thousands. Alina, John whispered quietly, tell me you're close. I can see Solitude, love. Alina replied telepathically. That's the second time in less than 3 days. How many did you bring? All of them. Fine. Love, there are ships coming from the sea. Friendly? Yes. Bearing the Imperial colors. Oh, then we only need to hold on. Rumble. The thunderstorm John brewed filled the sea with mist, and the rain started falling to wash the blood off the old walls. Envy landed behind John and looked around the city where only corpses littered the streets. It is as if the city just killed each other. Envy stated. Yes. John replied as he crouched down to close the eyes of a young Imperial soldier who died with a blade in his hand. I failed to stop the dragons. Envy wasn't feeling sentimental by any means and slowly started to raise the dead dragon cultists per John's orders. Whenever a dozen were raised, she would send them deep into the city to disappear into the heavy mist. The legionaries and the Nords formed a defense line. The cultist berserkers attacked with no fear and traded a kill for a kill in the name of Alduin. The dragons in the sky were circling with the storm and roaring. The first was preoccupied with Mirren and Zykiel. The second was pushing against the battle mages, and the third was helping the cult advance. All this, and that was just all too noisy. John had to stop all the sounds of fighting and focus on his own melody in this chaos. System, put on some music for me. Been a while. Playing AC/DC Back in Black. You want a massacre, huh? John gathered all his sin artifacts at one's place along with Nefertiti and Beth, who teleported on a nearby rooftop. Pride floated as its usual norm. Greed equipped John with the Lord's mail and the helm of the Dragonborn. Lust transformed him to the Dragonborn appearance. Gluttony fused itself with him. Wrath descended beside John and acted as his flank soldier. And finally Envy, who lagged behind while raising dozens of zombie cultists. Hiya! John rushed in with a vigorous spirit, and the world in his vision shook as he broke through the morning mist and found his first cultist. The mammoth anchors were released, and John battered his first victim and a line of victims after him. He breathed in and shouted the elemental fury shout to make his attacks faster. He would hold the head of the cultist and then smash it like an egg before finding another and stepping on him a few times to level him with the ground. A hole was created in the cult's formation, and the momentum of the defenders was restored, but the scenario where the dragons intervene whenever the cultists are pushed back would repeat itself. This time a dragon came down and flew along the main avenue as he avoided the battle mage's magic missiles and then opened its maw to breathe out fire along the main avenue. Dragonborn, save us! The defenders shouted as they knew how many casualties would drop to this dragon breath, which they were projected to one time before. John was indeed ready to cast the largest magic ward he could, but as soon as he readied the runes, a sound was heard from the sky, and numerous homing frost spikes lined the back of the dragon. "What do you think you're doing?" A voice of a beautiful crowned Valkyrie sounded in the sky as Griffin descended down towards the head of the dragon. The dragon barely recovered his balance and was about to fly away, but the griffin landed on his head and attacked his eye with its talons. "Rower." Alina commanded the griffin to open the wound further to open the way for the next attack. She had a passenger behind her who was more than willing to mess up that sound in ways nobody can imagine. Isha jumped off the griffin back with a frenzied cry and stabbed the dragon's eye socket with the spear of bitter mercy. The griffin disengaged with the dragon, and Alina flew off to attack the cultists on the roofs by freezing them with her magic, jumping down and parkouring through them with her twin blades, getting as many kills as she can, then jumping on her griffin again as it was biting the heads off a few cultists. Those women are nuts. Why is there a dragonborn to begin with? I'll never know. John laughed, and through the mammoth anchors that the dragon Isha was on to force him to land. John advanced to the dragon and took out the Daedric artifact weapon called the Ebony Blade. But on his way, Dragonborn, a dragon priest appeared. "Who are you?" John halted his steps and looked at the new foe. "You may not know who I am, but your death is..." The dragon priest started a conversation, but John rolled his eyes back. "Pride," as John called. The elder staff launched itself like an arrow and headshot the dragon priest. One hit, one kill. Still, the body of that dragon priest dissolved rather than just falling dead. The dragon priest mask was especially standing out, especially with the hole that Pride made by passing through it. "You think you can kill me this easily?" The voice of the dragon priest reached John again as he heard it from the direction of the cultists. "Pride." John called Pride once again, and the staff moved like an arrow and dropped the dragon priest with a headshot. "You won't stop me." Yet the dragon priest appeared once again, and without any order, Pride moved and dropped him down before curving and dropping the new emergence of that annoying dragon priest. Pride can kill this fucked up dragon priest as fast as he can return, but there are too many cultists. Envy starts soul trapping all the dead enemies. The enemy uses vacant bodies by jumping through the masks they're all wearing. Artifacts are always powered by the magicka of the user, and taking them away wouldn't help, so the easiest thing to take away is to soul trap all of the enemies. Envy got her orders and knew it was time to fight directly. The undead queen started to radiate with power to the point where her original appearance as Potimus Septim radiated over her physical body, Envy. She took to the sky above the cultists and made a terrible noise that shook the core of their souls as she started to snatch their souls, living and dead. There was no stopping the undead queen, as she was just the dread of solitude. The appearance of Envy surely attracted attention and will cause an uproar later, but John was satisfied with the result and turned back to what he was doing. "Hey, honey." John indeed turned back, but he saw Alina standing there right away, which instantly caused him a halt. "Hey, darling," Alina replied. "Who's that?" Alina pointed at Envy. "Yes, that is my new artifact of envy." John replied. "Ah, she looks like a really nice lady." Alina remarked. "She ain't." John made a silly smile and waved with his hand as if it's nothing. "She's just a 500-year-old undead." "That stopped you before?" Alina asked. "No, yikes. She's basically made of dead stuff." John retorted. "Isn't Venus of Lust 4,000 years old?" Alina asked. "You know what? I'm not even justifying anything. You talk to her, and you figure it out together," John said, and walked away with confidence. We'll do that, Firemane. Alina watched as John walked away, which gave him chills and stress. Luckily, he had a dragon to pour this stress on. Back at the city gate, there was a fight going on between the dragon and Isha, who managed to wound him badly. Die, flying lizard. Die, human worm. Isha held her spear in the dragon's eye socket and tried to go deeper, but even the power of the spear of bitter mercy wasn't enough to take down a divine being such as a dragon. On the other hand, the dragon fought Isha but couldn't shout at her, as she was avoiding his front and couldn't shake off the spear since it was stuck in his skull. But this stalemate had to come to an end. Glad to see the two of you getting along. John ran towards the dragon and cut his wing with the ebony blade. The dragon couldn't contain the pain and tried to flap away from John, but he was badly wounded. His failed attempt to retreat gave John the opening he needed and diagonally slashed the dragon's neck. Roar. Isha now. Got it. Isha immediately untangled her spear from the eye socket and fixed her position under the dragon, where John just attacked before driving her spear into the wound. The critical hit meant death for the dragon. The flesh of the dragon dissolved into energy. The energy flowed from the dragon to the Dragonborn, and he could hear the hums of Sovngarde shaking deep into his soul. John collected the dragon skeleton immediately and was about to look for the remaining dragons before he was faced with the tip of Isha's spear to his face. Don't teleport my honeyboo into a battle like this again without asking me, Isha said. Seriously, woman, Mirren is a man. He can take care of himself. John wanted to complain. No, he can't. He's clumsy and softy. Unless I am in a fight, he's not allowed to fight. Isha didn't back down. God, what kind of stupid shoujo fiction did you two come out from? John couldn't believe what he heard. It's called I love my soft and squishy husband so much, and I always want to protect and pamper him, but his friends are being a bad influence, and they shall face their end at the tip of my spear. Barf. John was already on his knees from the pain of his stomach churning. Woohoo! As the two had their argument about Mirren, a certain familiar Daedric Titan flew above their heads with a certain familiar high elf riding its back and shooting down some pursuing enemy. The Daedric Titan Zykel and his rider Mirren Almarai had a dogfight with two dragons and caused them to go in circles. Mirren's masterful marksmanship kept the two dragons at bay, as Zykel circled the sky aimlessly. Bad influence! Isha shouted at John and wanted to run and save Mirren, but John stopped her. Don't worry, it is now over. What? Look! John pointed at the sky and the direction where Zykel and Mirren were flying to. The dragons pursued them relentlessly, but as they reached the heavy mist above the sea, Zykel made an aerial maneuver in the open sky and started flying the other way, which disturbed the dragon's flight as they needed to adjust their speed. The reason Zykel could do that was that he has 4 limbs, and so he used them to bounce off something. That thing wasn't detected by the dragons yet, but as soon as they entered the mist, they crashed with their faces into a wall. Hundreds of chained harpoons flew off the mist and penetrated the bodies of the 2 dragons mercilessly at the sight of all people. The 2 dragons shouted, and their worshipping cultists screamed with anger, but there was no saving them. A red-haired man appeared in the sky holding a chain and spare harpoon as he slowly advanced midair, but what followed him was an unbelievable sight. An island floating in the sky. Thousands of dare troopers and members of the Firemane clan all stood on the edges of the floating island with chains and harpoons. John's domain, the floating island of the Golden Dragon Palace, emerged to the world for the first time in history. The reinforcements jumped off the island as they climbed down the chains and joined the fight in the city. The cultists stood no chance when their dragon lords were captured and their wills were broken. They started to run and escape immediately. They left everything that would hinder them down and broke loose into running. The city gate was open and the road was clear except that it wasn't. The Imperial Legion was on the gate, and leading them was an elderly man on a white horse. Emperor Titus Mede II. Chapter 646, Crisis Lifted. The Imperial Vanguard Cavalry led the charge in the City of Solitude, and the defensive forces chased the retreating cultists. The Firemane clan members and the Dare Mercenary Corps landed from the floating island and assisted the defenders. The battle was over, and the Siege of Solitude concluded in a matter of minutes with this grand finale. The Emperor of Cyrodiil was a brute of a man with a menacing look in his eyes. He was riding a horse and waving a greatsword left and right as if it was nothing. Once the cultists were cornered in the Market of Solitude, he descended off his horse with his royal guards and started chopping off the cultists 3 and 4 at a swing. During the mess, and when nobody was looking, John changed his look back to his usual rather than being the Dragonborn, and joined the frontline chopping cultists as well. When all concluded, and when only one struggling cultist was left, the Emperor punched the last cultist, which sent him towards John. John slashed the cultist's torso without cutting the man in half, but made him drop to the ground. John kicked the cultist back to the Emperor, but held his neck up at his sword's edge. The Emperor approached slowly and looked at John with a confident smile before raising his sword and executing the cultist per John's generous offer. The sword fell, and the head was severed from its body in a merciless, bloody scene. With that, the defenders cheered for the hard-earned victory and for the glory of the Empire. The Emperor looked around and felt proud as he dragged his greatsword up again before resting it straight on the ground. For that, all the cheers stopped, and in a single unison, everyone knelt to the Emperor. Not everyone, as when John was about to bend the knee, the Emperor reached for his shoulder. The old Emperor was a man whose hair has mostly receded back and started balding with age, but he still kept a large goatee beard of mostly white hair. His eyes were that of a warlord, but despite his ferocious looking, he had a deep wisdom in his eyes, which John couldn't measure. "Old friend, Johnrad," the Emperor called. John looked back, half surprised and half disgusted, making his expression strange. "I am—" John wanted to say something, but the Emperor interrupted. "Not Johnrad." The Emperor realized. John Hild Johnradson. The Emperor looked around and noticed many tall redheads in the crowd, but Johnrad was not present. Actually, he spotted who could be Johnrad, but that man hid away in an alley, which made the Emperor put on a sorrowful face. He then turned to John and signaled for the crowd to rise. "I see you are twice the good man I heard of." The Emperor spoke to John with a smile. "This fills me with pride, Your Majesty." John said, "Let's have a proper talk later then. The city needs to function, and my presence shall hinder everything. Be well, John Dare." The Emperor said and walked off with his guards that kept staring at John. "Thank you, Your Majesty." John nodded and backed away respectfully. He had to show proper respect for the man that kept this crumbling empire together for many years and won the Great War. False Emperor. False and mortal. He is no emperor. He is not of the dragon blood. Oh! John heard the whispers of envy and looked up to see that Envy was on top of Castle Dower, eyeing down the Emperor who was being escorted in. John sighed in his heart and raised his right hand towards Envy. Immediately, Envy was moved off her place as if pulled by John towards him. The moment she reached him, she was only an ornate skull covered with ebony metal and resting on his hands. Envy has 2 forms, the Dragonborn priestess form and the skull form that was initially Potima's skull. In both forms, Envy is immensely powerful, but now she's not on autopilot. "Your Majesty, how is this mortal an emperor? He can't be an emperor without the dragon blood. He can't be an emperor without the amulet of kings." Envy spoke to John, but no one heard it since it was telepathic. "As I said for the 100th time, I am no emperor. There's no dragon blood emperors anymore, and the bloody amulet of kings was shattered by the last remaining septim." John replied with his mind as well. "The amulet shattered?" Envy became shaken, as this was almost impossible in her mind. Yes, a Daedric invasion happened. The last septim heroically sacrificed his ass to summon Akatosh and beat down Maroon's Dagon. All things considered, the septims died out, and there is no concept of dragon blood emperors anymore. Akatosh sealed the rift between Mundus and Oblivion, and we all live happily in the Fourth Era. Oh, Fourth Era, year 202. John took on Potima with no mercy, which caused the ancient lich to remain silent for the time being. He was about to start dealing with the aftermath of the situation from his side, but he was immediately stopped by General Tullius and a score of Legion soldiers. Thane John, General, we thank you greatly for this assistance with defending Solitude. The general paid John his due respect. That was my duty. However, the general cleared his voice as he watched John's expressions carefully. You have entered Solitude with a score of your men who fight under your banner. This is serious aggression towards Solitude. We're pulling out, General Tullius. John replied, slowly. Pulling out too fast is bad and painful. We just need to take our breath, then pull out. John had to make it awkward, and so the general felt beyond annoyed. Thank you again. The general spoke, then about that floating island in the sky. What island? John asked. Over there. The general pointed towards the location of the floating island outside the city. There's no island in the sky, General. Islands fly nowadays? John asked. The general had the urge to shout at John, but after the way he was treated by the Emperor, the general had to pile it on with the rest of his stressful burdens. Over there, behind the sea mist. The general pointed. Oh, that, it is no floating island, General. John shamelessly denied. It is not. The general tilted his head slightly. Nope. That, sir, is a big-ass portal. What you're seeing is Winterhold, but the portal is big and in the sky, so it looks like a land that is in the sky, except that it is not a land in the sky. The general looked to the battle mages on his left and right, and they all looked puzzled. There is a large magical reading, but it is completely different from what portals give. In theory, portals can't be that big. A battle mage said. Have you seen the portals made by the forces of Daedra above the Imperial Palace 1,000 years ago? John asked. No, the battle mage replied. What do the records say about them? John asked. That they were so large that they would swallow the entire Imperial city in one go. The battle mage replied in a daze as. Yeah, imagine. John said, have a nice day, gents. John wanted to leave quietly, but a rude fellow punched him in the guts. Huh, that's my nephew. The man passed by John and stopped in front of General Tullius. Tullius. Haven't seen you in 20 years, you old grumpy fuck. The man said with contempt. Tyr fucking Firemane. General Tullius looked at Tyr Firemane and spat on the ground. Still showing off your battle scars, acting all brave and shit. I have a lot more now. You soft, milk-drinking folk from the strategic office are always as smooth as a baby's butt. Watch it, Firemane. You're a war hero, all right, but to me, you're still that little spy from the Blades. See that, John? Your old uncle here used to bully him when he was still a tactician officer, and now he's all general and shit. Tyr called John. You two have fun reuniting, old people. John had to move on and finish the mess left for him. John returned to the Golden Dragon Isle and absorbed the remaining 2 dragons that were lying dead in chains. If a dragon was killed before the Dragonborn gets to him, that dragons would remain until either another dragon absorbs or revives him. These dragons were the last of the secret dragon horde. Unless Alduin revives more dragons, the only dragon left in that division is the one called Lotso-Vengean, the leader of the horde. Sadly, Lotso-Vengean is not the kind of dragon that plays a fair game. He was the one John found in the sky before the day of the battle, and the dragon didn't even try to fight John head-on. Unlike the Wise Dragon's horde's leader Onakindrog, whom John spared, Lotso-Vengean is a devout of Alduin and seemed like a tactician rather than a fighter. But John was nothing if not a schemer at heart. Nefertiti, how was it? John asked. The cat stepped out of John's shadow and rubbed her body against his leg before sitting down and yawning. Human, making me work so much is bad for my health. She replied, I hope you didn't turn lazy as you did last time with Sir Anna. John said as he tickled the cat's neck. She purred a bit while closing her eyes before replying. At least she was nice and let me sleep, unlike a certain woman. She replied. John stopped tickling her neck, carried her up, and started shaking her around. No, jerk home note. Nefertiti bit John's hand to escape him before turning into her human form. You miss my hair. Is it done or not? John asked. It is done, Nefertiti said before hugging his leg again. Now, gimme food. John rolled his eyes and waved his hand a little before a plate of specially made tuna appeared before her. She took it right away and went running. God, girls are so tiresome to raise, John said with a warm smile, but soon Beth came to his vision holding a staff twice her size. Not you, though. Thank you, teacher. How is the thing I told you to do for me? John asked her. It is going well. Nothing outside of the expectations. She replied as she showed him a magic crystal from her pocket. In the reflection of the crystal, John could see various parts of the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. Keep watching the situation and report to me again tonight. John patted her head and let her join Nefertiti to play. John was currently looking down Solitude from his floating island, which was enshrouded within an artificial mist. I don't understand. It was then when a skull spoke to him. John took out the skull and reshaped it to take the humanoid form of Envy. It was strangely resembling an elderly woman with sharp features, but rather than an evil face, she seemed dejected. I have time on my hands, so ask away, Queen Potima. John said, You possess power, an army, most likely a kingdom of your own. She said, I'm not a king. I'm a businessman. I am also not a jarl or a prince. I am just a thane in Winterhold. A thane? Winterhold? The barren wizard land? Potima asked. The northern paradise. John retorted. Your ambition is too small for one with the dragon blood, for a true dragonborn. Potima said. Here we go again. John smiled. Don't worry about my ambition. I just see things from a different perspective. What is a greater perspective than lording over the entire Tamriel? She asked. You see that city down there? John said and pointed to Solitude. Everyone and their mothers in that city owes me money. John then walked a little bit to the east and pointed. Mordhal owes me money. Then he pointed south. Whiterun owes me money. Then east, Windhelm owes me money. Falkreath owes me money. Dawnstar owes me money. Even Markarth can't stand on its own with its silver mines and owes me money. Only Riften has been resisting so far, and they are economically in a shitty situation, and once Maven is dealt with, they will owe me a shit ton of money. The sun reached the apex in the sky, and the entire Skyrim was revealed behind John. I own this place, all right, John said. See that emperor down there? He's having it rough. You had it rough too, with a treacherous palace and scheming councilmen on every corner. John added, So your power comes from money? The imperial family has endless coffers. Potima said, Not money. Success. You see, an empire is on the top of the food chain where there is no imagination left. No more going up, no more evolving. If you come to the top, one day you have to get down because life is not a mountain to climb, it is a road to walk. If you get to the highest point you can see, you will have to get down at some point. John smiled and aimed his sword forward. But if you don't look for the highest point, but rather keep taking the road ahead and keeping this trail of success going, you won't reach an end. You'll just meet new challenges and either conquer them or learn from them. I walked that road to the end of me. John had a conviction that no power is eternal and no road leads to the top, since the top is nothing but an illusion. It is the journey that is the prize, not the destination. Potima looked at John and remained silent before saying, Then for you, I live a life that is nothing but a waste of air, she said, sadly. John agreed, but you're one of the 3 women I find most fascinating in this world after my wife, of course, and my mother's. Never thought I would witness that day of being a historical figure. Potima mocked. Who are the other 2 women? Aside from the legendary Wolf Queen of Solitude, I think the Lady of Mercy Almalexia and the Mother Queen of Mournhold Berenzia to be the most fascinating 3. The living goddess and the old hag. More like the dead goddess and the most awesome grandma in the freaking world. Almalexia is dead 200 years ago, along with the rest of the tribunal. I'll recommend a few books. John said nonchalantly, but as he finished his words, a tick was heard around him. Now to round 2. John became excited. What's that? Potima asked. I asked my kitty cat to put a tracking shadow on that annoying dragon priest you were fighting. We have found the hideout of the final dragon. That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.